Do you ever feel caged by society's expectations and wondered why you feel that way? Our guests Reyel Inconcencio and Mikey Inton-Campbell debunk misconceptions and stereotypes for this second episode of Trans Speaks. Hi, I'm your host for today, Yas, and this is my co-host Zoe.
Hello, I'm Zoe, and joining us here today is Mr. Reyel. Would you please introduce yourself to us?
Magandang hapon, magandang gabi, magandang umaga. Kung kailan mo papanoorin ito o pakinggan, ako si Reyel Inoncencio, ang Deputy Executive Director for Programs ng Pioneer FTM, ang Pioneer Transgender Men, Transgender Masculine Org in the Philippines, and we celebrated our 10th year anniversary last 2020. So, medyo matagal na rin kami.
Amazing!
So we advocate for trans men's rights, of course, human rights as well, and of course, yung access to trans health. Important.
Of course.
Ayun.
Actually, nakita ko po yung website nyo, and I saw na you guys have a trans men health portion, tapos may similar project po kayo with Victoria by Love Yourself.
Oo. Sa kanila kami nagre-refer.
Amazing! Kasi in our first episode, we had a speaker from Love Yourself po. And it's nice to know na nagko-cooperate po talaga yung mga organizations to bring a better...
We have a very wide umbrella naman and very active network. So, syempre, itong Victoria, malaki yung utang na loob namin kasi they provide free healthcare sa aming mga members na walang access talaga na to endocrinologist kasi sobrang mahal nga ng consulta lalo. So, kaya laging fully book ang Victoria kasi puro mga trans men.
That's amazing.
So, bago naman namin sila nire-refer, nagsuso-GS muna kami. Kasi para maintindihan nila na it's all part of the expression, not their gender identity. So, we don't confuse two independent things.
Right. That's good. Always educate people first na before making them make a choice kasi mahirap po talaga yan. Ayun. Wow. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today, actually. The episode is going to be about misconceptions and stereotypes. And yeah, let's start it. So, for our first question, as a trans man, of course, although you identified yourself differently when we asked you a while ago, could you explain that to us more?
I identify as transgender masculine non-binary.
Ah, that's interesting.
Very lengthy lang.
Yeah, very lengthy. But for our viewers or listeners out there, what exactly does that mean?
For me kasi, iba-iba yung trans experience. So for me, iba sa friends ko, iba sa members, iba sa ibang org. So, ako kasi, I'm not on P, wala akong balak mag-testosterone, wala akong balak mag-op, anything, top, bottom. So, happy na ako sa katawan ko ngayon. And kaya ako nag-identify as such kasi I feel like trapped in a binary situation na gender is not a binary thing. And being transgender is a definition na you don't identify as the sex you were born with or assigned. Yes, the sex assigned of birth. So, transgender pa rin ako. And the masculine part is the expression. And the NB, of course, is the non-binary. So,
yes.
Most of the time, I identify as trans masculine. Pero kung lalagyan mo ng mas identifier, NB talaga.
Right. So for our listeners out there, you don't have to subscribe to the binary when you're labeling yourself. And actually, you don't even have to label yourself. There's many ways for you to choose your own identity or to identify with what you feel comfortable with. And thank you for letting us know about that. Kasi I think that's the first time I've actually heard someone introduce themselves like that.
Yeah, kaya very active ako sa advocacy. Kasi para pag may nakita ng mga bata na, pwede pala yan, di pala ako kailangan mag-feed, di ako kailangan mag-off. Parang, ang tangi mo, is, hindi ako yung assigned sex at birth. Transgender
Yes.
ka. Kasi, alam mo yun, devil's advocate ako eh. Kung titingnan mo sa org namin, madalang yung ganong representation, which is very detrimental sa mga ibang trans folks na ano yung kanilang identity and who they are as a person
Right.
na okay, dahil lahat magtiti na rin ako. Ako personally, I have health issues. I cannot go on gender
Kasi
affirming
hormones
hormone.
po,
Yes,
no?
exactly. And
Yes.
we
It
don't know the
messes
risk
with your
yet.
cholesterol and your
Mm-hmm.
blood pressure.
Oo, may
Po.
high blood ako actually.
Kaya.
Oo, thank you din sa Victoria kasi once upon a time, of course, nag-figure out pa ako kung ano talaga ako, what I want to do and who I am. I consulted Doc Migs from Victoria, Love Yourself. And nakita doon, luckily, na early signs of high blood hypertension. So at least na ko siya, na detect
Naagapan
early
po,
on.
no?
So
Yes.
that's the silver lining to it na okay, hindi talaga ako pwede kasi my parents are both hypertensive. Si dad nag-mild stroke na yan tsaka heart attack. So sobrang big risk na ayoko i-take. Kasi siguro personally, I am not a risk taker that much. Parang we don't know yet yung mga sakit na alam natin, ginagawa pa rin natin Yung barbecue, may sunog, di ba? Cancer ka, pero kakainin mo. You know the risk, right? Yung pa kayang mag-i-inject ka ng hormone to actually alter some chemicals in your body that you don't know what big of a risk that you're taking.
So that's actually very on point with our topic for today, no? Actually, thinking about it, grabe pumasok sa isip ko na parang, oo nga, like a lot of trans people are forced to, not really forced, but are like influenced by society na parang kailangan talaga mag-transition or kailangan talaga to go through hormone therapy.
HRT
Yeah.
or surgery.
Hindi naman natin sila masisisi doon kasi
Of course.
syempre meron pa rin tayong tinatawag na patriarchy. Lahat ng kasalanan ng mundo halos sa patriarchy. Na you have to pass as a man, you have to pass as masculine. You have to bind, you have to have beard, you have to have masculine features. Pag wala ka nun, hindi ka trans man, hindi ka trans masculine. So, parang gumagawa tayo ng division, 'di ba? Dapat nga inclusive tayo Within the community, sadly, merong ganong concept pa rin. And I don't blame them.
Yeah, that's true.
Kasi ganun yung paniniwala. Andun yung societal big issue na kinakaharap. Na even the toxic masculinity in-invite ng maraming trans men so that they can embrace their own masculinity, which is very wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, they subscribe to toxic masculinity. Oo, na parang,
actually,
you go.
I want to revisit you and you were saying about you said you're transgendered, transmasc, and non-binary. Since now, even though it's all lengthy and all that, like it's also one of the things personally for me. Now I also wonder, like, is it possible to identify as such? So now that you've shown it, I think, wow, that's really cool, and that's like a thought for another day. But since you're like you're like all three of it, use all three. I want to know, it's like, how do you deal with the stereotypes associated with each?
Siyempre, nung una, para akala ko FTM talaga ako kasi yung kababata ako, yung nagpasa sa PFTM. And ganito, lagi pag after Soji, HRT agad. Parang excited yung tao pag testosterone. Bakit kaya hindi tayo mag-focus sa Soji? Parang yung laging tanong ko. Parang, di ba, yun yung kung sino ka bakit doon ka kagad sa yung alter something na parang,
about yourself.
Akin yun bakit hindi na, transphobic ako, no? Yun yung experience ko. Parang sa akin, parang kailangan ko magpahas. Siyempre, nag-binding din ako. Yung may mga hacks na ginawa ako, yung parang sa, supporters.
Yes.
Oo,
yung tatlong sports bra, na-try ko na rin yan.
Grabe, hindi ako makahinga. Hika ako. Hindi pwede. So, X yun. Tapos, syempre, naghanap ako ng magandang binder. Una kong binder, pwede ba magsabi ng brand?
Sige, okay lang yan.
Bitsy siya. Okay naman, flatinella. Kaso nagka-ulcer ako. Kasi yung the band itself dito,
It's
naipit
tight.
yung sa part
Opo.
ng stomach ko. Eh, nag-acid reflux ako, di ba? So, naiipit siya. So, nagkaroon ng parang laceration sa tiyan ko. So, it's very difficult to be trans talaga. And yung early stages, kasi masasaktan mo talaga sarili mo. So, dapat talaga meron ka support group or kahit na support system, family mo, friends. Kasi sobrang siya, curiosity bites. So, nung una talaga parang testosterone, lahat, testosterone silang testosterone. Lalo pag nagtatanong sa GC, kailan mag-order ng testosterone? Sobrang active. Ako, nagtatanong ko sa sarili ko, kailangan ko ba talaga yun? Kasi ever since I was young naman, comfortable naman ako sa skin ko. Para nung una kong pasok, doon ako nagka-dysphoria pa. Parang kailangan ko ba mag-adjust sa kanila? Parang wait, may mali ba sa katawan ko? Ganon. Kung iisipin mo, some of your folks can induce your dysphoria. Kahit wala ka naman. And from the get-go na parang, andyan siya. Pero pag na-trigger siya, ang sad lang kasi within the community na-trigger ako. Para
Although it's
tagal
not
ko siyang,
really their intention, no? Pero
oo.
minsan nangyayari
Siyempre
din
kasi yung
talaga.
truth nila,
I
iba-iba tayo
understand.
ng truth. Kaso may presumption na pare-parehas tayo ng truth. Eh, hindi. And I beg to
Actually.
disagree. Kasi sobrang risky. Parang kailangan ko ba mag-pass? Lalo yung boses ko. I was highly dysphoric about my voice, about how I speak. Kasi sobrang, sasabihin nila parang babaeng bakla.
Ay, Diyos ko naman. Grabe.
Parang
That's so
bro,
rude.
chong, laging, parang, papi. Di ba, ako, kita yun naman, so
From
parang nalita ako.
people in our community mismo.
Oo. Aminado tayo doon. Parang ayaw lang natin sabihin kasi naging lalong divisive.
Of course.
Pero yun yung sad part na parang, lalo lesbians and trans folks, sobrang debate yan. Na bawal daw mag-pee pag lesbian. No! Isa uling myth. Kahit yung nanay mo, kung gusto niya maging masculine, kung cis woman pa rin siya, cis woman pa rin siya.
Actually,
kasi expression siya, yun.
Yes, it's your own subjective view of your own gender and your own expression. So, hindi naman pwedeng ibang tao magdidikta ng para sa'yo.
Pero mahirap actually nung pumasok sa PSP. Parang figure out pa kung sino ka. Kasi everyone else of your peers are on P. And you will question, why am I not on P? It's kind of a peer pressure actually na you don't, parang akala mo, this is what you want. No. It is being dictated to you that you need this, that you want this.
Grabe, wait lang, yung utak ko parang umikot-ikot. Parang ako rin, parang naisip ko tuloy, gusto ko lang ba magbago dahil yun yung gusto ng society or gusto ko talaga? Kasi,
exactly.
wow.
Ganyan ako, yung parang ganyan yung process ko. Wait. Parang I consulted din my partner, parang what if mag-tea ako? Parang naganoon siya, parang sabi niya, wait lang, susuportahan kita, pero parang nagugulahan din ako. Kasi they are non-binary as well.
Nice.
So, ang saya din, parehas kayong ending. Ang hirap.
Sana all.
Yeah.
Oo.
Actually, it's good nga to see the, kasi we see it a lot in media, and personally for me, I encounter a lot of youth na they talk about, or at least I meet baby trans mask. I'll call them baby trans mask. So, hindi pa sila legal. So parang they're always like, wow, I want testosterone. It's like, it's like, kailangan ko talaga yun. And parang hindi siya obvious na topic na you can be trans mask without injury. Kasi nga, okay, personally for me, as someone from this country, I have yet to see actual studies with the side effects in the longer run about HRT. And, as a health conscious, if ever I plan.
Parang hindi naman sa pagiging transphobic. Kasi hindi lahat ng trans on T. Ang gusto lang nating malaman is, what are the medical risks?
Of course.
Yes, parang, of course. Pag dinidiscuss mo ba siya, parang ini-invalidate mo na yung transition niya and the choices that they made. No, you're speaking on the objective manner, the scientific manner or basis for such claims.
Right. Hindi naman pwedeng pilitin kung hindi talaga kaya kasi it could
Oo.
really put you at such huge risk for
Oo,
getting
sobrang
sick
laki.
or hurt.
Hindi mo alam kung anong pwedeng mangyari. Bukod sa alam na natin na ibang findings, very early on pa lang kasi na we don't have enough data on trans elders. Kung ano
Right.
yung nangyari sa
Yes.
kanila, ano yung naging sakit nila.
Yes.
Pero
Right.
yun nga, iba-ibang katao.
Tama.
So aside from the HRT pressure, do you feel pressured to pass in other ways
Yeah,
as a
like
trans man?
how you behave, how you dress, or kung paano ka gumalaw or express yourself. Nape-pressure po ba kayo na to conform to a certain standard? Yun na lang sabihin natin.
Dati, when I
Dati.
was early on figuring myself na parang, sinabi ko nga, di ba, parang gusto ko dapat maging masculine, change
Mm.
my voice, how I talk, how I dress naman is masculine talaga. Comfortable ako
Right.
doon early on pa lang, bata pa lang ako. Passing, yeah, ba hindi, ngayon hindi na ako nagbabay. Ano,
Oh.
advocate ako of health talaga, na safe binding. Alam ko walang safe
Yes.
binding. Ang safe dyan is
Yeah.
don't bind. If the
True.
dysphoria allows, or the gender dysphoria is not that strong enough, ako, nakakalabas ako ng walang bra. Most of the time, naka-seamless bra. Kaya may ulcer ako.
That's nice. That's very good to
Hmm.
achieve that level of like
Confidence.
certainty and
Oh.
confidence within yourself. Ako, for now, pag masyadong malala dysphoria ko, I really need to bind or else I feel like suffocating.
Oo. Kasi parang sarili mo na susuffocate ka na, paano pa kaya sa ibang tao? Pag malaya ka sa isip mo, malaya ka bilang ikaw, ano pang gagawin ng ibang tao sa'yo? Parang noise na lang siya.
Oh my God. Preach. Sorry, natouch ako doon. Kasi
Kasi
ako,
na,
I've been dealing with those struggles as well.
mahirap
So,
siya.
yun talaga, how you deal with these and respond with these expectations in your own way. Pero how did you deal with those? Like, sinasabi mo ba outright na parang, ay, hindi, okay lang na gusto mo yan, pero ito ako eh. Ganon.
Ako, nung una, syempre, nagko-conform si sis. Katagalan, syempre, I have my own voice na. Na-empower ako ng mga higher-ups ko, ng mga matatagal na sa PFTM na know you're valid. And that made me really happy na, okay, I can advocate for trans mass MDs na tulad ko na gusto nilang ganito sila. Na dati gusto ko mag-pass, pag tinawag akong ma'am, ballistic. Ngayon parang inisip ko pag ma'am, parang I'm a pretty girl. Totoo yun.
Nice, that's so nice.
Parang, ineng, yes.
Yes
Oo.
po.
Sabihin, maganda ako. Parang hindi naman, most of the time kasi we went ballistic na thinking na sinasadya nila. Minsan kasi yung mga tao, hindi naman nila meant to offend you.
Yeah, they
Parang
just,
you need to say it kindly na, I prefer this. So, pag kupal na sila, saka ka maging
pwede ka
ballistic.
na magalit nun. Of
Kasi,
course.
may communication barrier agad. Kaya hindi tayo go across them. Diba? Parang, entitled ba kagad? Galit kagad? Diba, pwedeng educate mo na sila. Tapos, pag kupal pa din, then you take the necessary steps.
Now that you talked about
Yeah.
other people, do you, like, is it hard for, kasi ba sa sarili niya, tanggap niya na kung na you're trans mass non-binary. Pero when it comes to other people, like, especially sa Pilipinas, how do they take it? Tanggap ba nila?
Madaling
Or like, I mean,
sagutin
in
yan.
different perspective.
Siyempre, dun tayo sa pinaka-basikong unit ng society, which is family.
Family.
I'm very glad na supportive sila. Diyan nga sila sa paligid. Pumasok sa kwarto. Sanay sila na may patok ako. And very proud sila. May mga patok ako. Oo,
so
supportive
nice.
naman. Tapos pag may nagmamam sa akin, sorry yan.
Oh, sila mismo yung nagko-correct para sa'yo. That's beautiful.
Your allies.
Oh, wait lang.
That's amazing.
Iyak mo na ako.
Sana all.
Sana all. Sila, kahit yung pamangkin ko, ang pronouns lagi sa akin, he, him. Ganyan. Pero nakasanayan na kasing tita. Ayoko nang baguhin.
Actually, nakakatawa nga eh. Kasi may tita, tito. Ano naman para sa non-binary?
Non-binary.
T-tex, gano'n.
Kaya nga, tits. Oy, tawag sa akin dati ng pamangkin ko, hindi pa niya alam. Bata pa siya, tits. Tits.
Okay naman. At least, gender neutral term.
See
No?
the
Pero,
nipple. O nga, gender neutral, di ba? Parang
pero
Philippines.
do you experience discrimination po ba sa workplace mo before, sa school when you were growing up, or kahit pag naglalakad lang po kayo sa kalsada, gano'n?
Workplace, syempre meron. Galing ako sa gobyerno eh.
True. Oh my God.
PR.
Ilaglag mo na, joke lang. PR
This
issue.
is spicy.
Naging whole PR issue siya.
Hindi naman. Hindi ko na pinalaki.
Okay. That's good.
Kaso hirap kasi kalaban ng gobyerno. Kung company mo, private, may laban ka.
Actually.
Kasi madali mag-PR, bugbugin mo siya sa social media, di sira pangalan niya.
Scandal,
Dito, sa gobyerno, sira-sira niya, wala ka na sisirain. See?
The tea.
Diba? Wala ka na sisirain dyan.
Actually,
Sa workplace, CR issue. Pag sa babae, may
it's
issue
always
ako.
the bathroom talaga.
Pag sa lalaki, may issue din. Saan ako i-issue?
Sa bagay, wala pang
Oo. Parang
gender
ni-report ako
neutral
na
bathroom.
bakit ako nasa women. Women naman ako in my birth certificate, my sex assigned at birth is F, daw pa is rin. Sa men's, hindi rin. Kasi naaasiwa sila. Even mga documents, sinabi ko, Mr. yung prefer ko, Miss pa din. Uniform. Siyempre, masculine. So, nagbarong ako. Kasi nga, siyempre, ang sabi, barong daw for men. Pinatawag pa ako sa HR kasi ba't ako nakabarong. So, nagpalit pa ako ng uniform, bumili pa ako.
Ang
Yung
lala,
color
what the
red.
heck?
Kasi color red yung pang babae. So, sige, gendered. Sobrang gendered ng gobyerno. Kung gusto mong
Oh my
pumasok,
God, ang lala.
punta ka si
Ayun po,
HR,
HR.
PW, dun ka.
So for our viewers, you had been warned.
You have been warned. Kung
Mga
ayaw
chikiting.
nyo ma-box sa isang huwag kayo mag-gobyerno dyan.
Oo, kasi
Pero
yung
grabe,
God,
ang lala.
yung God nila, hindi pa masyadong puro yung mga lobo lang na kulay violet tuwing March, yun lang yung God nila. Yung gender and development nila. Hanggang women pa lang, Juana, mahusay ka,
Actually.
diba? Babae ka. Paano pili ako babae? Hindi na ako mahusay.
Oh my God. Grabe.
So you've touched on about gender categories and uniform. I want to ask, how about medical services? Pagpunta kang hospital, let's say for check-up. Kamusta naman yung paris?
Ako kasi comfortable ako sa F. Comfortable ako tinatawag na naman. So wala akong issue doon. Diba, mga physical exam, syempre. Other trans folks kasi baka sila, gender dysphoric na F, tapos naka-T na sila and all, post-off, i-issue yun. Ako kasi walang bahid. Pretty girl, asa girl.
Yes.
Okay lang.
So it's not hard for you naman, like pag mga check-up. Pero for other trans, it might be hard.
Mm-mm. Sabi ko nga, iba yung trans experience ko to them. So, parang ako, hayahay yung kwento ko compared sa kanila. Actually.
Because mas comfortable
Oo.
ka sa sarili mo.
Parang yung gender dysphoria, nilabanan ko siya ng psych lang. Utak ko. Kasi kung papalaban ako sa society, tsaka sarili kong utak, matatalo ko. Kasi ang isip ko, kung nagpa-top surgery ako, bottom surgery, tapos yung society hindi pa rin maayos, walang mangyayari sa akin. May dysphoria pa rin ako kasi andun sa external ang problema, wala sa akin.
Wow, that's such a good
It's actually a really good point.
Actually,
Parang
it's
lagi
all
mo
about
pa-
your locus
oo,
of control.
Babaguhin mo yung sarili mo. Yung labas. Yung mga tao.
Hindi pa rin ready
pussy.
kahit magbago
Oo.
ka. Oh my God.
Kahit anong transitioning gawin mo.
Mind blown. Grabe.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, my brain just exploded. That's such a good
Yes,
point.
marami tayong pag-iisipan
Oo,
about transitioning now.
mamaya,
Maganda
hindi ako
reflection.
makakatulog. Yun na lang pag-iisipan ko para, oh my
May chat
God.
na lang
Kailangan
ako
ko ba yun?
kailangan ng kuya. Andito naman ako.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we actually
We do.
Yas and I were talking about like, do we have like parang gay mentors for like are these different like trans? Oh, and it's good to know that you're willing to be a trans masculine, like a kuya or even a tito.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know kung gusto mo maging tito.
Oo. Wala
So
kayong
that's
problema
nice.
dun. Silang
Yeah.
kausap. Pati mga viewers, chat nilang ako.
Actually, it's
That's
so
good.
nice for you to offer that. Kasi as someone who's like genderqueer, yung hindi pa ako like I'm not really comfortable with putting myself on either part of the binary, and hindi rin naman ako a gender. It's like so hard to find people who understand yung
Yeah.
struggle of like trying to figure out kung saan ba ako
Saan
lulugar,
ba?
Ako din.
kung kailangan ba ako lumugar, or kung
Exactly.
pwede na ba akong mag-exist as myself and okay na yun. You
Mm-mm.
know, it's so hard to think about that.
Like parang hindi ba pwedeng individuality as a gender?
Oo, what's your gender? Doom.
Me.
Fail.
Me. It's I myself.
Yeah, oo. Parang din ako dati ng tatay ko, like 12 years old. Ano ka ba, lalaki, babae? Neither, no, neither nor, either or. And that is his
Yeah.
history.
Actually, napag-usapan namin ni Zoe, dun sa mga bathroom na may male and line, tapos female. Tapos sabi namin, alam mo, feel ko ako yung line dun sa gitna ng male and female sa bathroom
Oo.
side.
Like I feel like a stick.
Yes.
Well, stick lang naman talaga tayo. Bakit lahat ba talaga nakapalda, nakapals? May nakapalda, babae.
Actually.
Yeah. No?
So in
Oh, I have like
terms,
another question.
yeah,
Ay,
go,
sorry.
Zoe.
Yes, let me
Go
answer.
lang, go.
Uy, nagkaya.
Yung ano, what do you call this? I know I've asked about the bathroom workplace. There's another and hospitals. What about when you travel abroad? Like yung mga passports.
Ayan.
Like I know I'm asking the real questions.
Yeah.
But
It's
issue
okay. It's
yan,
right.
actually. Lalo na kung nag-testosterone ka, fully ano ka na, medically transition, maging issue siya. So, pag mga ganyan, hinihingan ng certification or medical certificate from the doctor that you're undergoing HRT. Kasi minsan,
So, like,
ang ano dyan, baka may kakap-kapan ka pa, parang about your genitals, na why is it F? Diba? Diba? Ang gusto ko nga dyan, kasi diba F is sex, diba? A sign of birth.
Sign
Why
of
not
birth.
add gender to
Add
it?
gender.
Not naman, medyo nagda-divert ako from the issue. Kasi di ba may legal, sex change. Kasi hindi lahat ng trans folks ay gusto magpalit ng kanilang legal marker or gender marker. Maganda siguro maglagay ng gender. Diba? Parang,
yes, para alam nyo na.
transgender or non-binary para maging mas specific. Kasi siya, for example, sa passport. Kasi sex assigned at birth yan. So, kung nag-transition na siya medically, hindi mo na talaga makikita. And doon nagkakaroon ng dysphoria pag traveling na. Minsan, bawal magdala ng tea, i-hand carry mo siya kasi sabihin, nagsismuggle ka ng gamot.
So, mahirap din talaga.
Oo, mahirap talaga.
So, like, mahirap like lumabas ng bansa tapos at bumalik din.
Pwede. Madali naman. Kaso yun nga, you'll go through process na hindi naman din nadaanan ng ibang mga cisgender na tao. Parang masyadong inaalam yung gender mo. Nagiging intrusive.
Yes,
minsan
without respecting
discriminatory.
your privacy. Yeah.
Parang kang clown or something na spectacle. Alam mo yung mga kinukuha na mga indigenous people, tapos ilalagay sa US, tapos parang naka-cage. Parang ganon.
Yeah.
Parang kang specimen. Uy,
that's not
trans siya. Sige. Let's ask intrusive questions.
Actually,
okay, so I have one more.
Go,
Sorry.
go.
This is a bit of a hot issue. I want to know what you think, but what about stereotypes and misconceptions in sports?
Yun, napag-usapan din namin ni Dad isang
Oh my God. Okay,
parang ang
nice
hirap.
question.
Please enlighten us.
Kasi syempre, di ba, kung trans men, dapat sa men. Kasi sabihin, babae yan. Pag nilagay sa women, hindi pwede, hindi babae yan. Puta, saan siya lulugar? Saan siya magko-compete? Sabihin,
Right.
sige, pare-pares kayong trans men, pare-pares kayong trans women. Di ba parang ini-inclusive, parang hindi siya inclusive. Parang sabi kasi ni Daddy, parang pag-usapan namin siya na why not magkaroon ng Olympics for trans people. Sabi ko, hindi lahat nagtiti. So, hindi pa rin
Mm-mm.
pare-pareha yan. Bakit
Actually.
hindi na lang na female? Ano mo sa female yung trans women? Parang andoon kasi dahil yung iba yung hormone, nag-alter siya ng katawan and such. Na, di ba nga yung ibang mga, for example, athlete, pag sinabing
Yes.
nag-hormone, tanggal ka, ganyan,
Doping.
nag-boost ka, doping.
Yeah.
Hindi naman to ganun. Pero meron ganun din siyang connotation kasi. So, ang hirap magsabi kung
That's
paano.
such a hard question talaga.
Mahirap.
Kasi there is an inherent difference
Oo,
sa
dapat
physical
inclusive.
capabilities.
Kasi ang
Kaya,
hirap na ilalagay mo sa women's kung trans man na nga siya, may testosterone na siya, boosted na. So, mas malakas siya kaysa sa cis women na puro
yeah,
estrogen.
right.
Diba? Talagang hindi pantay.
That's true. Oh my
Tapos pag
goodness.
isasama mo siya sa mga cis men naman, sabihin hindi naman pantay kasi parang galing sa factory naman daw yung testosterone niya. Diba? Ang hirap.
May pagganong pag-iisip. Diyos ko,
Oo,
oh my
actually.
God.
Yeah, so pero I in connection with that. So parang it's still do you think na parang rooted just sa transphobia? The whole yung mga attitudes towards transgender people in sports.
Oo. Kasi hindi alam nila kung ano yung trans eh. Ang alam lang nila
Right.
LG.
They don't understand. Yeah.
Yung B, nasa LG yan, nakagitna yan. Yung B, mamimili yan kung L or G yan.
Oh my
Yung
God.
T,
The
L lang
invalidation.
yan, tsaka G. L at G lang.
Right.
Doon pa lang sila sa face na yun, paano pa nila malalaman kung ano yung T?
Actually, malaking issue na rin sa sports, no? If you're homosexual.
Oo,
Grabe.
parang nakakabago pa yung performance mo.
Exactly. What does it do? You're just interested
Isipuan
in
mo ba yung
people of
mga
the same gender.
lalo sa
Right.
basketball na hyper-masculine. Kaya ayoko ng NBA.
Right. Grabe.
But it's actually, we need kailangan talaga educated people.
Hindi lang basta educate kasi pag tinuruan mo sila kung hindi naman nila naiintindihan. Parang, ito yung soji. Ganyan. Ayun yung soji mo, ha? Parang,
Help them change their perception. Yeah. Sige. Well, aside of that, would you say na here in the Philippines, may parang bias sila sa mas madaling like i-accept, like is it easier for them to understand trans men or trans women or non-binary? Actually, feel ko hindi nila magets-gets kung ano yung non-binary. Pero in your opinion, is it just as difficult for everyone to be accepted or parang may bias yung mga tao kung ano yung mas madaling i-swallow, kumbaga?
babalik tayo sa patriarchy.
Okay, let's go back to the patriarchy.
Bakit sinabi natin na society mas madaling i-accept? Trans men who undergo gender-affirming hormone therapy is easier to accept than trans women and non-binary. Even trans men na identifying as trans men pero hindi nag-T, hindi yan tatanggapin. Tibo pa rin yan sa mata nila. Kasi babalik tayo sa patriarchy. Pag mukha ka ng lalaki, ando ka na sa estadong yun, respetado ka na. Pero kung iisipin nila from lalaki ka na, ando ka na sa sitwasyon na yun, nag-transition ka to female. Sabihin, bayot, mababang uri. Hindi ka pa rin babae. Kahit sabihin mo babae ka, hindi mo alam kung saan lugar mo as trans women. Kaya ang daming violence against them. Kasi they don't know where to go, actually. Hindi daw sila gay. Hindi sila babae.
You touched on gender violence. May I ask, do trans men also experience gender-based violence?
Oo naman, pero systemically lower against trans women. Iba yung galit ng sa trans women. I don't know why.
Baka kasi yung ano, like you said, the patriarchy. Sa
Yeah,
mata
exactly.
nila,
Okay.
women have to be a certain way. And to have like, to be attracted to someone who was not, in their eyes, originally a woman. Parang, na-insecure sila. Naisip nila na, oh, maybe I'm gay or something like that, no?
Oo.
So that's why it results in like this gender-based
Violence.
violence against them. That's so messed up.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, it's quite sad to think na I mean, relative to what a trans man experiences, they're more likely to get to be on the receiving end of these on the violence, of the assault, the abuses. And like
Oo.
actually, we don't hear that in news. Like we'll hear about trans women
Yes.
dying, but we don't hear about trans
Kasi we
men.
have the
Like I
privilege.
don't know if that's a good thing. So it's a privilege.
Kasi the patriarchy is catering to us. Kaya kami toxic masculinity within the community as well.
Ang hirap.
Oo.
It's a very good to point out.
Ayoko na lang pero seeing my folks na sharing sex videos, objectifying women on social media, it really grinds up my gears. Parang, lalaki na kayo niyan. If that's
Just
masculinity,
doing
then I
that
don't want it.
affirm you.
I don't
Oh
want
my
it.
God. Kasi parang nakaka-affirm siya na I belong with like real men.
Hindi ko rin
Ganun.
naman masisisi. Sabi ko nga,
Right, of
systemic
course.
issue. But
Yes.
then, tao ka na, adult ka na, kaya mo na mag-isip for yourself. Bakit naman ako nakakapag-isip? Kayo din naman may mga isip. Ba't ganun?
It's so interesting.
So, sa non-binary, lalo na.
Nobody understands us, Char.
Mamili ka lang kung ano ka.
Actually, I get that a lot. When I was explaining it to my parents, my mom, like sabi niya, I don't understand. And I was like, oh, it's okay.
Parang
Pero,
like snowflake. Quirky ka na niyan.
right. Yeah. But it's hard to explain to people who've only known the binary, who've only known like, oh, there's two options, being a man.
Yeah,
or
mga gender reveal ng mga bata. Diyos ko Lord.
gender reveal.
Oo nga, nagiging tradition sa atin yan. Sa US naman kasi.
Actually.
Very detrimental to the kid. Sana hindi na sila gumastos.
Actually,
Parang
sayang
ito
yung cake at yung
reveal.
balloons at lahat.
Paano kung trans siya?
Right, that's
Sayang
so
naman yung
painful.
budget.
And hindi lang yun. It's like exposing all of the adults who are going to be in that child's life na, oh, you were supposed to be a boy. That's what your gender reveal party
Oh, sayang yung
dictated
gender
na.
reveal. Gumastos kami.
Right?
Sobrang, backwards.
Oh,
Buti na lang hindi na
that's
uso
a
noong
lot.
1995.
Oh.
There was one question I forgot to ask you before I had
Hindi, go
to
lang.
leave for a bit.
Go lang.
So I want to ask, what do you think about transgender in the military?
Kay Biden.
No,
Ate.
let's go in general. In general.
general.
Tapos pwede nating iba-iba. Tapos, yun, kung...
Fascist. Charot. Fascist inclusivity. Ako, wala akong comment.
Wala
Kasi ayoko sa fascista. Hindi ako naniniwala sa military.
so,
kung gusto
pero-
nila, go. Kasi ngayon, ayaw eh. Yung mga members na rin gusto mag-PNA. Pero sige, kung gusto nila ma-include na inclusivity sa fascism, sige.
yun.
Fasistang rehimen, ibagsak.
Oo, diba? Parang, supportahan ko ba ng mga trans men yun? Hindi, ibagsak nga yun.
Tama.
Oo, PNP, ganyan. Magtatanong, hi, hello po. Auntie, gusto ko mag-PNP. Sabi ko, bakit? Diba? Parang, yun yung, patriarchal symbol, the military, the police. Parang, why would you subscribe to toxic masculinity?
Right. When in fact, ang dami nilang ini-incite na violence towards us.
Yes.
In
Yeah.
A lot of transphobia then.
Yeah.
O naman,
Yeah.
yun nga, homophobia lang eh.
Oh, that's another important thing. Sorry, like all the questions are rolling.
Sige,
right
sige
now.
lang.
So like,
Go
yeah,
lang, go lang.
I know. So the mga misconceptions and stereotypes. Paano naman sa media? Do you think na accurate yung mga depictions
ng
Wala nga
struggles
masyadong
ng
depiction
trans.
pero more on
Exactly.
kailangan mag-tea, kailangan mag-post, ganyan.
Yun pa rin.
Laging pretty, posty, ganyan. Laging may presumption na every trans guy has that story, has that desire to undergo HRT, which is in fact, hindi naman. Pero yun, very limited yung presentation or yung representation ng trans men. Kahit yung mga nagtitina, konti pa din. Pero sa
Right.
trans women, medyo madami. In drag, ganyan.
For trans men, wala
Wala
rin.
masyado kasi
Wala
nga,
masyado.
marami nagsistef. Yung pag,
Stealth, yes.
pag gano'n na sila, okay, lalaki na ako, magtatago na ako sa flow of masculinity and patriarchy. Okay na.
Hide in the cocoa patriarchy. Why is that a thing?
Alam mo, hindi ko rin
Somehow,
naman
I see
nasisisi.
that.
That concept.
Kasi gusto nila maging
Right.
normal. Hindi lahat willing maging iba, willing na lumaban sa sistema. And okay lang yun, sila yun. Ako kasi parang ang shallow ng ganun sa akin. Para mabubuhay lang ako, para maging masaya ako. Parang, paano naman yung mga ibang tao? Katulad ko na andun pa rin sila sa stage na yun, na parang naguguluhan sila. Where in fact, kaya ko silang tulungan na, hoy, pwede yan. Diba?
That's nice. So, do you ever get criticized by those people na nakapag-transition and nakapag-hormone therapy for your choice in not subscribing to that?
Hindi na sinasabi siguro. Hindi na siguro sinasabi, pero ramdam ko naman.
Oh no.
Oo,
So, there
parang may
is.
ganun. Hindi ko na syempre pero I feel na lagi akong iba sa kanila.
So,
Even
there's
though I fight for their rights also because I'm also one of them, pero parang merong
May division.
alam mo yan, parang within the community nagkakaiba-iba.
I see. So, it
Parang,
really does feel like the patriarchal thing na parang you're not one of the boys.
ew!
Kumbaga.
Oh, one of the boys is subscribing to that na mamanyak ng
Right.
babae. Oh my God, hindi naman nakakalaki ng pagkatao.
Yeah, that's so true.
Parang, ewan ko, siguro, ganun lang talaga ako.
Pero is it hard
It's good to see.
to go about, like, you're just minding your own business,
Yeah.
tapos mararamdaman mo talaga na you're you're out of place in a place where you're supposed to be part of it.
Actually, yan. Minsan, nalulungkot din ako, pero may mga kaibigan din naman ako na nakakaintindi. Pero hindi ko na masyado iniintindi kasi nga, ito yung ako. Take it or leave it. Ayaw mo, di ba?
Right. It's good that you can be that way, no? Pero parang, it's kind of sad kasi what if there are people like you who aren't as confident and is looking to join, like, or be a part of something like that, and then they would feel na, parang,
Outcast pa rin sila.
Kahit, parang, in society right now, hindi pa rin ako tanggap. Tapos, kahit dito rin, parang hindi rin ako tanggap.
Saan ako luluwag, diba?
Yeah.
Ano yan? Mabigat yan. Self-reflection yan. Kasi kahit anong salita gagawin ko dito, kung hindi pa matatag ang loob mo, wala.
So, you really have to build your own, like, self-love and self-confidence.
Oo, kasi walang iba magmamahal ng sarili nila.
That's a good point.
Kasi kung di mo mahal, kung maghahanap ka lagi ng usang kabilong, wala ka naman iba-iba tayo eh.
That's right.
Walang
You need
parehas
to
na
love
tulad
yourself.
mo. Walang yung magkakambal nga, di mo magkakaiba.
Because we're all
Yung katulad
individuals
mo.
nga naman.
May pagkakahawig, similarities, pero we're still different. Love yourself kasi wala namang iba kundi ikaw.
I find that really amazing na when you really embrace, like, knowing from your story mismo na you're embracing being a trans man, non-binary, and not going through the typical na pinapakita for a trans man. It requires so much courage and confidence and self-love. And I think that's really something a lot of LGBT people out there need to see. Kasi cool na tayo yan. Sa pagmamahal. Parang may mga
Kakahanin.
joke na, minahal ka ba ng mama mo? Like, honestly, parang ganun.
Parang
Yes,
kung
Parang,
mahanap tayo ng hanap ng pagmamahal sa iba kung hindi mo mahal sarili mo, you'll not go anywhere.
naririnig nyo ba yan,
Amen.
guys? Naririnig nyo ba yan? Oh.
Tama na daw ang pagmamahal sa
Tigilan na yung
sarili.
bumble-bumble.
Masasaktan ka rin
Ay.
naman, di ba? Love yourself first. Yun yung, yun yung lesson dito.
Oo.
Just go. Kasi I see a lot of peers who are in the LGBT community who opt to stay in like toxic relationships just because they think that no one will accept them if they're not in one. And parang hearing that from someone not as like not that far away from me in life, it's good to know na I don't have to be in a relationship or I don't need to find other people to accept me if I already accept myself, diba? Kasi kung nireject ka ng world, edi okay, fine. I still have myself and I still love myself.
Sana all. Sana, yun talaga, sana all.
Sana all lang, no?
Yeah. I think that's what's nice, like in LGBT culture. Yeah, I read that from somewhere. Things that LGBT culture teaches you is ito talaga to have that self-love.
And that's
Right?
self-confidence.
In our society mismo, medyo kulang tayo. Like let's be honest, hindi tayo growing up, we didn't really have much mental health. We didn't really have, a lot of us are being minority actually. A lot of us grew up at risk. A lot of us don't have the same privilege as cisgendered people.
Yeah.
So talagang tayo mismo yung maghahanap. Tayo mismo rin. And wow, that's a lot of work.
Oo.
Yeah, it
How
is
do-
a lot
how
of
do-
work.
I'm so amazed. How did we get this far in life?
How do you love yourself?
Yes.
Gusto mong mabuhay
Actually, give us
ng
tips.
Yes.
proseso siya. Kasi ako diagnosed din ako with depression and anxiety PTSD. So, ang tagal. Ang tagal, bakit ako ganito, ganyan. Daming self-questioning. Pero kung aabot ka sa stage na wala kasing ibang makakatuwang sa buhay kundi ikaw lang. Not necessarily yung partner. Siyempre may partners tayo. Pero may mga sarili din buhay yun.
Right.
Ano kung wala na yung parents or and you're left alone? Diba? Sino makakatuwang mo? You're on your own. Yun yung totoo.
It's a bit heavy.
Yeah, that is a bit
But
heavy.
it's true. I was like, but that's true.
I am on my own. Diba?
Tapos ramdaman pa nga yung pandemic.
Not necessarily lonely, Not necessarily lonely.
Not
Para you
really.
have to stand on your own, to believe your own principles, and love who you are as a human being. And don't subscribe to any of that, ay nakakabox sa sarili mo.
Yeah.
Palayaan mo yung sarili mo and hindi mo na kailangan pang pag-adjust para sa ibang tao.
I really love this. It seems like tayo talagang tayong mga bakla. Or like an LGBT in general. Once we get all the help, support, and love and validation that we get, like for ourselves, like coming from ourselves, and we give it to ourselves and share it to others, tayo talagang bubuhay sa mundo.
Future,
Tayo magre-revive.
Naisip ko lang na in our media nowadays, I don't know if it's because our generation is just depressed or something. Pero like, ang daming nagsaspread around na parang, ayun nga, yung sinabi mo kanina, minahal ka ba ng mama mo, kaya ka ganyan. Or like, may daddy issues ka ba, kaya
ganyan ka.
Kaya ayaw mo sa lalaki, ganon. And it's like, there's a lot of negativity surrounding not just the trans community, but the whole LGBT community na hindi nakakaganda sa mental health natin.
Oo, parang pipiliin mo din kasi.
Right.
Sa sarili kang screen kasi maraming kupal sa mundo. Hindi sila mag-a-adjust para sa'yo. So, ikaw mag-a-adjust.
Pero grabe, ang lakas na influence talaga.
Oo naman kasi majority sila.
Yeah.
Pero hindi naman lahat ng majority ay tama. Mabrul minsan. Ayan yung pusa ako. Sabi ko sa'yo, yung pusa ako eh.
Okay lang po.
Yeah, that's really a lot to take.
Yeah. Medyo nabigatan rin ako dun. Like,
Sorry.
it's the truth
No,
of the
it's okay.
world.
Yeah.
Pag-cleanse
Pero
na tayo.
But I think that's the first step, diba? Into coming to self-acceptance. You need to understand na when everyone's gone, you only have yourself. And then that's when you start building your relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
We all need that.
Hindi siya overnight na
I
nangyari
think,
sa akin.
yeah.
Parang
course.
parang bilib yung tao sa akin. Wow, ganyan na siya. Hindi. Taon yan of trauma, taon yan ng iyak, taon yan ng bakit pa ako nabubuhay, ayoko mabuhay. Proseso siya. So, doon ka sa stage na ayoko nang munang mabuhay. Go, namnamin mo yan. Kasi kasama yan sa develop. Hindi, chika lang sa akin. Siyempre kasama din yun. Kasi pinagdadaanan niya. Pero hindi naman dapat to the point na yung violence, hindi dapat kasama sa buhay na.
Yes.
Sorry, hindi dapat yun. Yung, yung self-love. Hindi kailangan may trauma.
Right.
Diba?
Kasi
Parang,
it wouldn't be good.
Kaya gusto ko nakakita ng mga queer kids. Kasi yung mga ginagawa natin, sabi, may bunga, na bata pa lang sila, din sila kailangan mag-come out. Personally, hindi ako nag-come out. Parang alam mo nun talaga nila.
Oh, you didn't need to. That's
Parang
great.
in-specify ko lang, hi, I am trans, and this is trans. Pero
That's so cute.
parang from the get-go, they knew that I was queer.
It's nice seeing, like, especially for us, like, personally for me, seeing we have someone like you who's a kuya, and seeing na nadaanan mo na yan, and you're at this point in your life na, I mean, it's still a journey, and but like compared to how it was before, I mean, tama naman na you have you've been it's been a long way, you have growth and healing, and it's good to see that a future like that actually exists for us, because a lot of people don't see that, like, or maybe I've just been surrounded with a lot of sad things.
Not sad.
Just sad things all around.
Yeah, so it's good to see that there's, you can be happy. Like Kuya Reyel here, seeing it, living the life.
Malaking din talaga, pamilya. Kaya ako naging ganito dahil sa pamilya ko. Kung hindi sila ganun ka, baka napariwara ako. Naiyak nga ako siya. Di, totoo. Kasi kung hindi suportado ng pamilya, kahit anong pagmamahal mo sa sarili mo from the get-go, na parang, di ba, sila yung nag-alaga sa'yo ng bata, kung hindi ka na mahal, yung questionin mo na bakit pa ako binuo, bakit pa ako pinanganak, lalo kong mga...
I felt that.
I felt those questions, sweet.
Pero ayun,
Yeah, I think
pamilya talaga. And araw-araw ako magpapasalamat sa pamilya.
That's beautiful.
Maayak pa ako.
And I guess for the people out there who don't really have like a good relationship with your family, families aren't just, you know,
kadugo.
through blood. Yes, you can find your own families out there. You know, it doesn't matter where you came from. You know, you'll find people who'll accept you for who you are.
Oo. Ang pamilya not necessarily tatay, nanay mo, kapatid. Usually, sila pa nga ang mga hila sa iyo. Lalo na yung mga nasa labas lang naman, yung pag saka ka naging successful, ay lalapit sa iyo. Pero nahihirapan ka. Kung todo...
Daming ganun dito sa Pilipinas.
Mga tsahin, lola mo sa third cousin mo, mga ganyan. Mga nasa labas lang. Noise.
Yeah, I think we just need to, I hope na, while we're looking for people, we're looking for a family like that, personally. I hope na we can be like that for others then. Diba?
Yes. Which is exactly why we're doing things like this.
Oo,
diba?
kasi pamilya
kahit
din tayo.
papano, yes, kahit papano, they know that there are people who are out there that they can talk to, that there are people out there willing to be there, to shelter them, even for just a little while.
Like tayo, yes. Hopefully we can do that for our org. Like,
yeah. Shameless plug lang. Kung
Shameless
hanap
plug
kayo
for
ng
the
pamilya na makakatanggap sa'yo, bahagsari.
Mag-recruit na kayo.
Joke lang.
No, but really, we're trying that.
And also, if you're
And
looking for an organization as a trans man or trans mask, non-binary, yeah, look for Pioneer FTM. I saw their website. It's very informative and it's very helpful actually. And dami ko natutunan from their website. And it's just, wow. To have an organization like that last for 10 years, the history
Mm.
behind it and
May mga matatanda na
people
kaming
behind it.
talagang
Yeah,
mga lolo
it's
na,
amazing.
tito.
yeah, that's so
Oh my
cool.
god,
Yung mga lola. Imagine,
maging
imagine
lolo.
like a trans lola.
Oo,
That's
may mga
That's
amazing.
tita lolos na
See that?
amazing.
kami na years, hindi mahigit ng 15 years only. Diba? May mga
Hala,
kids na rin, family. Ganyan.
That's so
grabe.
nice.
Gusto ko rin makakita ng ganun.
Future is
Oo,
bright. I
Right?
see it. The future is bright.
lahat kami ng
That's
One day
encourage
amazing.
na
kahit mga
zone.
bata, go.
Kailangan natin pagpatuloy as mga
Yeah.
ganito. Actually, I think it's good nga that we're doing this. Parang we're being the bridge.
To connect. Ganun.
Connect. Yeah. And it's nice. Yeah. Like we just need to get it out there
Yeah.
and
Actually,
hear their stories.
we've actually covered all of the things we wanted to talk about for today, and we were hoping that you had a message for anyone out there listening, from your experiences and everything. Maybe to a baby trans person, or
Egg, oo.
actually
Mga
to any
Baby
an egg, or baby
egg,
egg,
oh.
Baby egg.
or to any person who's like questioning their identity right now, who wants to figure it out.
Ang message ko lang, sinabi ko na kanina is,
Mm-mm.
be yourself, love yourself, be your rock, search for a family. Tapos, kausapin nyo lang ako. Dito lang ako sa PFPM.
Yes.
Kasi hindi ko naman
Yes.
lahat pwede masabi dito. So, chat nyo lang ako. And
Okay.
I'll be your kuya, ate, kote, kung ano gusto mo.
Kute. That's
Oo.
such a good word.
So,
Cute.
non-binary, kote, di ba?
Kute.
Para
Yeah.
andito lang ako para maggabay kasi, di ba, konti lang tayo. Tayo na magsama-sama. Yun lang, mag-iingat kayo, yung mga batang nag-iisip pa kung sino kayo. Valid yan. Huwag kang
Yeah.
papagapi sa society na kailangan mo maging ganito.
Mm-mm.
Kung
Don't
sino
let
ka, ikaw yan.
misconception.
Wala kang
Yeah.
gender dysphoria, trans ka pa din. Hindi naman ibig sabihin na kadikit ng gender dysphoria ang pagiging.
Right.
Yes.
You can be yourself without feeling like you can't be yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Right. And don't let misconceptions and stereotypes stop you from being who you
Be
are.
your own self.
Right. Gender expression is for you. Tama. Right. Thank
Yun
you very
lang.
much. That was so informative, and grabe, I learned so many things, not just about
Oo, magbanlaw
the
muna kayo.
yeah. Oh my God,
Watch
parang gusto ko
something,
maligo.
Netflix. Take a rest. Huwag niyo
Right.
masyadong damdamin.
Yeah,
Masyadong
need to think
malalim si kuya.
later.
Huwag niyo muna yung isip.
Yeah.
Right. We'll be back with our next speakers after this short break. And we are back with our second guest for today, Miss Mikee Inton-Campbell, and of course, my co-host Zoe.
Hello.
So, Miss Mikee, it's nice to be seeing you through Zoom. Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself for our listeners out there?
Hi. Thank you for inviting me to this space. My name is Mikee Inton-Campbell. I am an alumna of UP Manila, so yay.
Yay!
Graduated in 2005. Don't do the math. BA Orcom. And since then, I have been teaching, mostly in different universities around the Philippines, but also I've taught at the University of Hong Kong,
Ooh.
and I am the incoming professor of trans and queer of color studies at California State University, San Marcos. So I live and teach and do research about transness. I'm also the board member, one of the board members of STRAP, the Society of Transsexual Women of the Philippines. We are the oldest trans organization in the world, in the Philippines, not the world. We were established in 2002. And since then, we have worked with government agencies, with hospitals, with doctors, with schools to try to improve their knowledge about trans issues, to give, Trans 101 introductions. I am also, sorry, ang haba, resume.
Hindi, okay lang.
Oh,
Okay
it's
lang.
okay.
I'm also a member of the grant making panel of the International Trans
Oh,
Fund. And what that is it's the only funding organization for trans, specifically for trans organizations around the world. So we give
wow,
out
that's really cool.
hundreds of thousands of dollars in funding to community-based trans organizations around the world. So that's what I've been up to since I graduated UP.
Amazing.
Uh,
That's
uh,
quite like a
yeah.
repertoire of things that you've done. Actually, it's the first time I've quite heard of the International Trans Fund. I didn't know
Yeah,
that there
I
was
know.
such a thing. That's quite
Yes.
amazing.
So apply.
And it's so sad
Oh, so
we don't
apply.
know a lot of this. Well, apply.
Actually,
Transfund.org. We usually do a call for
transfund.org.
applications sometime in June or July, and then um, yeah, it takes about a year, the entire grant cycle. But it's only for trans organizations, and the organizations have to be trans led. So like, if the organization is LGBTQ, there are other funders for that. Um,
Right.
so yeah,
That's amazing. So for our listeners out there who are part of trans orgs, yeah,
Or if you want to start one,
yeah.
yeah,
you know where to get funding.
do
Hmm.
that. Transfund.org.
Yep.
Right.
This is international. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's so cool. Like all around the world. It's nice.
Yeah. So like, when you now we got a glimpse of your many involvements with the trans community and the advocacy for and advocating for trans people. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the struggles and the misconceptions and stereotypes that trans people
Hmm.
face, right?
Hmm.
So, personally for you, may you would you be willing to share the ones that you've
Oh yes, of
experienced?
course. That's what I'm here for. No, should I just dive in?
Well, if you're
Yes.
comfortable with it, yes.
Yeah. So there's so many different misconceptions about what it means to be trans, especially in the contexts outside of the West. In other words,
Right.
sorry, is this too academic? Just let me know.
No, no
um,
problem.
No, it's okay.
in,
It's
in
fine.
We actually love
in
to
the
hear it.
post-colonial context, no,
Mm,
the Philippines has undergone what, several centuries of
sorry.
Spanish rule, and then
Mm,
rapid economic and public growth during the American period, devastation during the Japanese period, and then trying to rebuild basically the country up until now. Um, so this very long history of colonization has kind of erased local histories of what it means to be trans. No, one of the first misconceptions that I wanted to talk about is um, that the Soji framework and transness itself is a Western invention. Um,
mm,
on the one hand, yes, it is kind of, because the people who drafted it are from the West. The people who
right.
drafted the Soji framework, or at least the first people to put that into writing concretely, are the people who wrote the Jogjakarta Principles. Um, and these are principles of human rights applied to LGBTQIA people around the world. Um,
Right.
one of my teachers was in the Jogjakarta Principles, was one of the
Oh, that's
drafters.
amazing.
Yes.
Wow.
But anyway, so there's this misconception that this whole phenomenon of transness is an import. Na parang wala namang trans dati. Um,
Right. Yeah, yeah.
and this isn't right, no. If you look at our history, pre-colonial history, and many scholars have written
Yes.
about this, J. Neil Garcia among them. Um, you can actually trace transness or what it means to be trans, or very broadly, practices of transness to the pre-colonial period in the Baybaylan, in the Catalonan,
Yeah.
in the Asog, and um, these gender benders were um, important parts of society. So they were respected, they were essential to the functioning of society, they were healers, they were spiritual leaders. Um, and in many cases they took uh, an integral part of the of the community. They were an integral part of the community, because if the datu, if the leader was away, it's the babaylan who steps in and takes over the rule until the datu comes back. So may ganong historya na matagal, na naluma, na nabubura ng mga colonial practices. No? This is a 3-hour lecture on how
Yes.
colonialism kind of erases
Race.
transness, or at least forms of transness, because it's very, very normative. Babae at lalaki lang.
And especially with the Spanish.
Yeah. But we're celebrating what, 500 years of Catholic rule in the Philippines, and it's like no one's talking about that phenomenon as a form of colonization, because it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Yeah,
Catholicism is
it
not
was.
Yeah.
something that was in the Philippines before the Spanish came. So why don't we talk about
Yes. Yes.
Catholicism as a form of colonization, which in fact it is. It very much. So,
Yes, it
and
is.
it's also one of the reasons why we don't have any laws that are considered progressive. We don't have divorce. We're
Right.
the only
Yeah.
country in the world with no divorce. Um, there's no abortion. There's no access to safe abortion, um, and many, many other
They're even
intersecting
quite,
issues.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're quite hesitant even to you know, say
For the
sex
Soji bill.
practices and the Soji bill that we've been trying to pass
Sorry, the
for
Soji
years.
equality bill.
I think that
Yes, the
bill is
Soji
older.
equality.
It's older than either of you.
Yeah.
Actually, it's as old as us.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
like,
And
my age
I,
around
I,
that.
I think it's
22
like
years.
22 or something. 22 years
Happy
old.
birthday. Just kidding.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, if that bill were a person, it would already be in college.
They would be sitting here with me right now asking why it isn't passed yet.
Yeah. So anyway, that was one of the misconceptions that I wanted to very, very clearly talk about, and maybe start from there. Um, yeah.
That's a good place to
yeah,
start,
I mean,
actually, because usually people don't think of that when they think of misconceptions or
Mm-hmm,
stereotypes. Usually they go to everyday life experiences, and it's nice to know that we're adding a bit of history, a bit of context as
mm-hmm.
to why that happened.
Yep.
Yes.
or more like retracing that it was an integral part of our
Uh-huh.
history that, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
erased when we got colonized. Like we always forget that we were colonized sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Three
honestly.
different people.
That's how colonization
Yeah.
works. I live abroad. I've lived abroad for a long time now. So
Yes.
I still get those comments asking me, why is your English so good? You know, uh,
Yes, yeah.
sometimes from professional people, sometimes from other academics. And I'm like, colonization. That's how that's how it works. Um, but anyway, the everyday stereotypes as well, these are also quite prevalent, but it's important to
Mhm.
reclaim that history, to reconnect with that history of transness, because we've always been there. Trans people have always been there. Um, and we've always been an important part of society, and we still are important parts of society. If you want to dive into the more better known stereotypes, let's talk about the parlorista, diba? During the pandemic,
Yes.
um, the reason why my hair is
Mhm.
so long is I haven't cut it in 2 years now. because of the pandemic. So kind of
Pandemic, yeah.
realizing how important these queer people are in your lives, in our everyday lives, diba?
Mm.
Um, for trans men naman, there's the stereotype of the bouncer, the bouncer, bodyguard, police, or janitor. Uh, uh,
Oh man.
ito yung mga images na nakikita rin sa pelikula because part of my research is film studies.
Film
So I write
studies,
about
right?
queer cinema in the Philippines. Um,
Oh,
and
wow.
then,
That's
the
amazing.
common stereotype for the bakla is the parlorista. The common stereotype for the tomboy is bouncer or bodyguard or janitor. Um, and these stereotypes exist still in society, and they are rooted, actually there's a history behind that, no.
Oh,
um
I'd love to
Oh,
know more about that actually.
yeah. Can you give us an intro to that?
um
Now we're just gonna listen to your lecture the whole time, actually.
this is fine. I haven't been teaching for a year now, so this is kind of nice. um
Yeah.
but kung titignan natin, for example, yung imahe ng bakla sa cinema, sa pelikula, um the first gay-centered movie that we have in the Philippines was released in 1954. Jack and Jill, starring Dolphy. Um,
Oh, it
Ganda
was a
tagpa ni
Dolphy
Dolphy.
film.
so that was 1954. This was, just after the Second World War. Um, but even though that was the first gay movie, and gay, I'm putting that in air quotes, um, bakla characters have always been there in cinema. Usually hindi lead role, no? Yung Jack and Jill, that
Mm,
was important kasi it was the first time that the bakla took center stage in a movie. It was an entire
that's
movie built
cool.
around the story of the bakla. Pero nandun ang bakla palagi. Um, they were always there in this in cinema. We were,
Right. As
we
comedic relief.
Yes, exactly. We were comic relief, no? And you can trace that actually back to vaudeville. Um, so
Vaudeville.
Oh,
vaudeville it's a form of
yes,
theater
yes.
adapted from the Americans. Um, basically variety show siya, no? And maraming mga vaudeville actors who played bakla roles. So when cinema started becoming a bit more popular in the Philippines with technology coming in from the West, nag-migrate yung imahe ng bakla as comic relief from vaudeville to pelikula. At ngayon, nandyan pa din siya, unfortunately, with the movies of Vice Ganda. Um,
Sorry, sorry. I just had to laugh at that
no,
bit.
that's an entirely different conversation, the movie. Kasi may progression yan.
Oh.
Di ba, dati pinagtatawanan yung bakla. Tapos umentra
Mm,
uh, both Dolphy and Roderick Paulate, the bakla characters that they performed. They were comic relief. They were, you know,
mm.
palagi silang sinasaktan, palagi binubugbog para maging tunay na lalaki,
Right.
whatever that means.
Right, yeah. That was a
Um,
plot.
yep. Tapos,
For them.
That's so sad.
nung umentra naman
That was sad.
si Vice Ganda, baliktad na yung power dynamics. Hindi na inaapi
Ah,
yung bakla naman ang nang-aapi. So parang
mm,
it's not necessarily a positive progression from the earlier stereotypes of kabaklaan that you find in cinema. Of course, there are other tropes. The
right, of
first,
course.
um, one of the first openly trans-centered movies in the Philippines was 1991. Um, Miguel Michel, directed by Hil Portes, if I'm not mistaken, and this starred Romnick Sarmenta, Hindi nyo nakilala yun. um,
I
Yeah,
don't
I
think we were
wasn't born
born
yet.
yet.
but he was a matinee idol. He was like, the super popular um, matinee idol at that time. Kind of like in the same way that Piolo Pascual is, the
Ah,
popular matinee idol. Sorry, hindi na ba si Piolo?
hindi ko rin po
Napaghahalitaan yung
alam
edad
kung
ko.
sino ngayon.
And in the movie, ang storya, so si Miguel nagpunta ng States para maging nurse. Tapos wala siyang communication with the family until 8 years after. And 8 years after living in the US, she's had her surgery, she's had her name changed, she's had everything done. She comes back, she doesn't tell her family. So,
Oh.
pagbalik niya, syempre, nagulat yung pamilya niya na parang, ay, babae ka na. Um, pero ito yung isa sa mga unang pelikula na merong openly trans na character. Um, or at least a character na sinabi, inarticulate sa
Na
pelikula
trans siya.
na not, no, they never used the word transgender. I think they used transsexual at one point. But
Mm-mm.
the word transgender never appears in Philippine cinema until very, very
Oh.
recently. And mostly in independent cinema. Um, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Kimidora, uh, I think it was the second Kimidora movie that used the word transgender to refer to someone.
Ah, yeah, I think I watched that actually for yeah.
Tapos meron silang gender conforming machine or something. And I was sitting in the
Yeah.
cinema, oh, gender confirmation surgery. They're using the politically correct term.
Amazing. Woo! That was a win.
Yeah, because I think dun sa Miguel Michel, ang tawag pa nila sex change.
Ah, yeah,
So yung
before back in
makaluma
the day.
talagang diskurso na maaaring palitan ang sex. But there's
Not
also
the gen.
politics behind that. Kasi this was the 90s. So usong-uso din yung mga Japayuki. So hindi na kayo familiar
Yes.
sa mga Japayuki.
No, I do know.
These were trans, bakla, gay entertainers who go to Japan and work in the bars, work in the entertainment industry as singers, sex workers, escorts, um, and they brought a lot of wealth to the Philippines. I know a lot of girls personally who have gone to Japan, come back to the Philippines, and their families are much better off. You know,
Yeah.
so sex work is work.
Yes.
So this was the time when the Japayuki phenomenon, the Japan entertainers, were very, very popular, very much in the mode, and very much visible in the public discourse. No, in the
Mm.
movie Markova, Comfort Gay, also by Dolphy,
Yes.
this was his second bakla role that was melodramatic. The first one was Ang Tatay Kong Nanay in the 70s,
I
directed by
think I've
Lino
heard of that,
Broca.
yeah.
In Markova, Dolphy plays Walterina Markova, who is, even though she doesn't say it, she's very, very trans. Ang tawag niya sa sarili niya,
Mhm.
bakla, badaf, bading. Pero yung performances, yung practices niya sa pelikula, at sa kanyang buhay, it's very similar to uh, what we now call transgender practices and discourses. So I would recommend that you watch that film. It's a really, really good film. Very well written.
Yes, we will.
The bakla
Yeah.
characters are very, very, they're very diverse. One of my favorite subplot lines is, because it's a historical film. So si Markova grows up during the Japanese occupation. And
Oh.
she's an entertainer, she's a sex worker as well, and one of her sex worker friends gets raped by a Japanese soldier. All of them get raped by Japanese soldiers. Sorry, trigger warning.
Yeah.
Well, one of her
Don't worry, we can put
friends,
that in the beginning.
one of her friends goes out at night during uh, curfew. She starts seducing Japanese soldiers, and then she basically slits their throat while in the middle of sexual congress.
That's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like,
An assassin.
when I was studying this movie, that was like, that's me. That's what I would do.
That's me. That's what I would do.
um, but of course, again, these stereotypes are, they're everywhere. They're in the movies. They're on TV. Um, what I find is missing is the trans person in the BL dramas that we have now. Um, bakit?
Yes,
That's such a good
actually.
point that I just realized now.
Oh, diba?
Yeah, I was like that never occurred
Yeah,
to me.
Right,
because
up
like
until this moment.
I look at independent cinema as well, and at least may mga bakla na openly bakla and trans in many of these independent films. Pero they're on the periphery kasi nakasentro yung diskurso, yung storya sa mga cisgender masculine gay men, which is fine.
That's also, yeah, it is.
But the bakla are on the periphery, you know. Pero pagdating
Right.
sa BL dramas, wala pa ako napapanood na merong openly trans or even really an effeminate.
A feminine, yeah, a
Um,
feminine
yeah.
gay man. They don't really like to show that.
There is one though, by Dolly Dulu, "The Boy Foretold by the Stars." It was
Oh, that
recently
sounds like an
released.
interesting title.
It This was part of the MMFF last year, I think, um, and I was able to see it online because they did screenings online, and I saw it, and I was like, "Oh, this is my story." Because it was a high school kid. It was a very femme high school kid, falling in love for the first time. And
Mm.
uh, I think it's an experience that resonates between me and my other trans friends, but also some of my gay friends are kind of like, "Ay, ganyan tayo nung bata tayo." So it was a very nice movie. But yeah,
Wow, I love how we're learning about the like a
Honestly.
quick run through to all these films in media, and I just wanna, and it's good we see that, and I wanna touch a bit about now that you mentioned that you had been living abroad. So technically, you have experienced Western and Eastern culture, at least Philippine culture, and would you say that the stereotypes faced uh in both sides do they coincide,
Or do they
or is it not?
vary? Yeah.
Yeah.
the stereotypes vary very greatly.
Mm.
Mhm.
Although there. Okay, can I be an academic for like 2 minutes?
Yes. Feel
Sure.
free.
When we talk about stereotypes and when we talk about tropes about people, culture, and everything else, um, we 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 tend to make distinctions between East and West. I would not make those
Mm.
distinctions. Um, I think it's much more it's much more useful to talk about um, the context of the post colony rather than simple East and
Um,
West. You know, but also caveat: I've never lived in the West, except now
oh,
I'm in New Zealand. But when I was living abroad, I was living in Hong Kong, so that's a different kind
Hong
of
Kong.
East, quote unquote, diba? It's a different kind of
Right.
post colony as well. Um, when I lived if I compare my experiences between living in the Philippines and living in Hong Kong and here in New Zealand, um mas madaming mga stereotypes, madaming mga tropes. I've encountered so many of these discourses, um but they vary very greatly. um in the Philippines kasi we're very judgmental.
Well,
True.
yeah, we can't really excuse that. That's true.
So it's like people stare at you, people will look at you, right? So if you have a different
I've
hair color,
experienced.
people will look at you.
I felt. Yeah, and my hair is pretty short too. So
Yeah. So
yeah.
if you don't fit into a norm, people will look at you. Um, so in the Philippines, when I was transitioning early on, I got used to the stairs. I got used to, you know, the bathroom as well. That's a
It's
very
always the
very
bathroom.
yeah, that's
It's
a
so
very old issue.
scary.
Exactly. It's like the bathroom isn't supposed to be a scary place, but for trans people and non-binary people and people who don't fit into the norm, really, it's a very scary place. I've had lesbian
Right.
friends who are like, "Can you go to the bathroom with me? Because I don't want to go. Because I look like a boy, and I don't want to get you know
Mm-hmm.
violence." I've had those experiences, and it's like it's. Can you think about? Can you imagine the irony in this? You're asking a trans woman to come with you to the bathroom for your protection because you're a butch
Yeah.
lesbian. So it's like we're things up left and right. Sorry, bleep that out.
No, no, it's okay. We can bleep that out. Yeah.
um,
Yeah, it just seems so messed
but
up,
yeah,
really.
I've
Yeah.
experienced that. I've experienced, security guards being called to the bathroom because I was there trying to put my eyebrows on. Um, in Hong Kong, nobody cares. So
Oh.
they're all too busy looking at their phones.
I see. I
There's
see.
Wi-Fi everywhere. No, um, but I don't know. It's a cultural thing as well. They don't. They're very non-confrontational to the point that they will not even look at you, even if you are doing something that's outside of the norm. Um, like I have seen drunk people passed out on the train, covered in their own vomit, and Hong Kongers just don't even bat an eyelash. They just
I'm just
kind of
like,
they step over
oh,
him,
that's normal.
and they're like, "Oh, there's another drunk guy." Parang normal lang.
That's
Um,
nice.
so they don't really care. Although I do have one friend who's also trans, and we lived in Hong Kong. We didn't live together, but we were very close friends. And she was telling me one time she was in line for the women's bathroom because for some reason there's always a queue in the women's bathroom. Um, and there was
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
Pinay butch-looking woman who was in the queue with her, and the Pinay looks at her and goes, "Ba't ka nandito? Doon ka sa kabila."
Oh my God, it's the fellow Filipino who does it to you in a different country. Oh my God.
Exactly. So it's
Oh,
like,
that's, oh my God.
can we think about the weirdness of this whole thing? Like,
Yeah,
um,
it is. It is.
yeah. So yeah. So it's like that. In New Zealand, absolutely nobody cares. I'm the one that stares. Because like, oh my god, I'm surrounded by white people. No. Um, but also because I live in a university town, so I'm surrounded constantly by weird hair colors and people walking around barefoot and just people doing their own
Barefoot.
thing, and I'm like, why are these children walking around barefoot? There's broken glass everywhere.
That's a good concern, though. Yeah.
But in terms of gender, nobody really cares, and I kind of have to say New Zealand is setting the 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 goal for basically everything around the world. Um, they have universal health care.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
and on my documents with my doctor, it says female. Um,
Oh, that's
so I was
wow.
like, um, I didn't even have to ask to change that. They were just like, okay, we're not really listing sex, we're listing gender. So we will list you down as female. And I'm like, I have no problem
That's
with
so
that. Thank you.
cool.
Um,
They opted out of the sex option and just chose gender
yep.
instead.
I mean, it still says sex, but the person who was coding it, my doctor, was like, okay, I know it says sex, but we're going to use gender so that you don't get misgendered in your documents. So it's that
That's
extra
amazing.
layer of concern, which is amazing. Um, in Hong Kong, they didn't have that. There's healthcare everywhere.
Well,
Also, it's very cheap to go to the hospital. You can get chemo for $100. 100 Hong
oh,
Kong, which is 700 pesos. Um,
oh, sorry. Wow, that's so surprising.
di ba? Um,
Yeah,
but if you wanted to see a specialist for your gender confirming healthcare, the line, the queue is like 6 months long. So you have to wait
six
6 months
months.
before you see someone, because there's only one person, I think, who does it. Although since
Oh,
then they have opened up, several other clinics, and there's more NGOs working with trans people to get access to transition healthcare. Um, and in the Philippines, we don't have any.
that we
Actually, that
don't
yeah,
because we
well,
don't.
that's not
Yeah,
true. We
here it's
do
still as.
we do
Yeah,
have some. There's very recently Lily by Love Yourself. Um,
yeah. Let's go love yourself.
I think it's in the south. It's in Parañaque or Valenzuela, somewhere down there. Um, and they offer transition healthcare for trans people. Um, there's also Victoria by Love Yourself, and they are in Pasay. Um, so walang north, no? May malaking gap sa Quezon City, wala. Some endocrinologists also offer transition healthcare, but they're
Mm.
very rare, and they're overbooked because these are
Oh yeah,
private
of course.
doctors. So, of course, they're also expensive. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, a consult costs 1,000 pesos. The blood tests that you need will cost up to 24,000 pesos.
Oh, that's so
Um, yeah,
expensive.
I know.
That's
I
so expensive.
The first time I went to my
It's almost
no, go
like
ahead.
I sorry, we go.
Yeah, the first time I went to my doctor, it was like, okay, you need the following blood tests, and she gives me like 5 sheets of paper and tells me go downstairs and get it. Um, when I get to the reception, I looked at the bill and I was like, 18,000 pesos for blood tests.
That's so. That, why? Why is it so
it
expensive?
I
it wouldn't be quite a surprise why if a lot of trans Filipinos would opt to have to transition abroad.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's um, it's not that we will have to go abroad to transition. It's that we go to the black market. um,
Mm,
Which is also
which is
unsafe.
very
mm-hmm.
unsafe. So like
Very.
we start hormones on our own, no? Especially if you're connected to
Oh,
um, older trans women, as I was. They were like, okay, these are the hormones that you take. This is the dosage that I was on. Blah blah blah. So like they can actually prescribe you a regimen of your own. But the thing is, they're not doctors. They're not medical doctors. We're not
Of
medical
course, of
doctors.
course.
So we
Their
can
dosage may differ from ours.
yeah,
Yeah.
we can tell you the drugs to take and where to get them, but we cannot guide you with you know your healthcare. Yeah, because there are risks to medically transitioning. Um, as there are risks in socially transitioning as well. And in the
Very.
Philippines, in many cases, both the social and the medical transition are very difficult to do. Because socially, you get a lot of
Yes.
stigma, discrimination. You can't get a job. um, and then medically, um, one,
Health
the,
risks.
the cost of transition healthcare of hormones is very expensive. Um, but also the access to doctors who know what to look for,
But
very very rare. So yeah, it's not a
wow.
pretty picture. I'm sorry, this is kind of bringing everyone down.
No,
no,
it's
no, it's
okay.
okay.
It's
It's good
like
to see it firsthand.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like a wave of reality, because for some of our listeners, they're probably still thinking about transitioning or trying to figure out their own identity. So by having this information, although it may be grim,
Mhm.
but it's the reality that we're facing right now in the Philippines, that it's really difficult for us here,
Mhm.
to find the right resources we need to be who we are.
Yep. um, but I, I also kind of want to give hope to people out there, young people
Yeah,
especially. Like, there are organizations that you can reach out to, and we can help you. We can't give you money,
indeed.
but we
Of course.
can offer you some support. If you need, for example, someone to talk to, if you need, what do you call this, recommendations as to a counselor or a therapist that is trans friendly, talk to us. We can connect you with some people. Um, Strap does this all the time. We get messages on our Facebook page all the time asking, is there an endocrinologist that I can go to? Is there a trans friendly salon that I can take my daughter to? You know,
Oh,
um,
that's nice.
and we try as much as we can within the limits of our limited, very limited personnel. um, we try as much as we can to offer as much help as we can. And if you just want to talk to a trans person, um, come and join the organization. Oh, sorry, for trans women only.
Yeah, for trans women, of
But
course.
we are
Okay.
starting to accept non-binary people. So
I see, I see. Is that a subtle hint to us? Just kidding. No, yeah, but I think that's why we wanted to do this podcast, so that people will understand that they're not alone in this, that
yeah.
there are organizations out there that they could join or even just check out,
Mhm.
and that they'd be there for them.
Yeah, and it's not just Strap. Strap is the oldest, we're the longest running one, but there are also very many others who are doing amazing work. Um, in Cebu, there's this trans organization called Colors. I don't think they call themselves
Colors, yeah.
Colors anymore. I think they've changed their name. Um, there's the Love Yourself Foundation, which is open to
Mhm.
trans people. There's Pioneer Filipino Trans Man, PFTM, the
Yeah, we had
oldest.
a speaker from them. Yeah.
Yeah, the oldest trans man organization. There's Team Trans Man Equality and Awareness Movement in Cebu. So there's a lot of other trans organizations out there. There's Ganda Filipinas also. I think they're based in Quezon City. And then there's the largest one, Trans Pinays of Antipolo. Um, I think they
Oh,
have over 200 members. Um,
wow.
and that's amazing.
It
um,
is.
yeah.
That's great. So yeah, for anyone out there listening, you know that there are places that you can reach out to. Honestly, in Facebook, you could just look for trans organization in the Philippines, and a lot of pages would come up for you, not gonna lie. Yeah.
Is that how you found us?
No, I researched.
Yeah.
Again, I did the
Yeah.
actual
Actually,
research. But yes.
I think I'm pretty sure there's like a Wikipedia page that says that's
Yeah,
there.
yeah, it says trans
Yeah,
organizations
we
in the
actually,
Philippines.
yeah, obviously. Yeah, so I love how you introduced this to like different organizations, and I want to go back like personally, like for you, I
Mhm.
want to ask you, is do you think it's easier to be accepted as a trans person in the Philippines, or is it easier outside
Yes
the
and
Philippines?
no. Um, it's easy in the Philippines because there's a bigger, more visible community. Um, so,
Ah.
you throw a rock and you will hit some bakla. um, no, don't throw stones at bakla. It's a hate crime.
No, of course not.
But it there's it's more visible in the Philippines, so that's very helpful. Um,
Mm.
there are policies and cultural things that make it easier for trans people to be accepted and to transition in contexts like New Zealand. Like here, again, healthcare is free, so if you wanted to see a psychiatrist, public healthcare will pay for it. If you wanted to go see an endocrinologist, public healthcare will pay for it. You know, um,
What? That's such a foreign concept to my mind. I'm kidding.
yes, um,
Yeah.
but yeah. So it depends also on a lot of different factors. There's the social
Mhm.
factors, but there's also cultural factors. There's also political
Mhm.
factors. There's the structure of the government. There's religious factors as well. Um, like if you go to the Arab speaking world, for example, then
Mm.
it's really kind of scary. But I have friends who are in Dubai and Saudi, and they're thriving. They're happy
Oh.
and they feel
Oh,
safe. So it's like you would think that a trans woman in Saudi would be in jeopardy, would be in trouble, but you
Right.
know, maybe not. Um, so it
Maybe
depends really.
not.
Eh. Um,
Mhm.
in Hong Kong naman, one of the things that local Hong Kong trans people are worried about is, well, one, the national security law from China, which is
Oh, yes.
draconian, but also there's the basic law that says only male children can inherit property. So if you transition, you lose your inheritance because you're no longer
Oh,
eligible
oh.
to inherit property. So may mga ganong
So like,
issues.
wow, that's interesting.
Mhm.
I didn't know
wait.
about
Speaking
that.
of that law, what if you transition to a man? Does that make you
That
eligible?
makes you, yeah, yes.
Oh,
Then,
Oh,
wow.
oh,
yeah.
that works.
So it works
Oh,
the other way
wow.
around. Yeah.
Wait. Wow.
But when you transition legally in Hong Kong, they require surgery.
They
So,
require
Oh,
yes.
surgery.
So
Like,
it's everything, forced sterilization, basically, because you're no longer able to have biological children. Um, and, right now, what I think a lot of trans people want is a model of gender recognition that is based on self identification. In other words,
yes, yes, yes.
let us
Like,
tell you who we are rather than
yeah,
the other
and you
way
don't get
around.
to decide.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Wow, but
And
that's
that,
wow, the thought that you're required
that's
to
actually
have
a
surgery.
fairly common requirement. In many states in the US, it's a requirement. In many, actually, it's easier to list down the self recognition countries because there's
Oh,
less of them. There's fewer of them. Uruguay, Argentina. I
Uruguay.
think Argentina was the first one um,
Oh, nice.
to implement that self recognition one. This was in 2012, so quite a while ago. Um,
Yeah, wow.
and that model has been followed by Uruguay, um, Malta, I think, is another one.
Malta.
Um, some states in the US don't require
Mm.
surgery. Um, where else? Yeah, my, my I'm drawing a blank
Wow.
because there's just so few of these countries
You.
yeah.
Mhm.
that allow you to transition without medical intervention or psychiatric evaluation. Kasi
Oh,
in other
psychiatric
countries, usually
evaluation.
dalawa yung requirement, no? Psychiatric evaluation tsaka surgery. In some
Uh-huh.
countries, they got rid of the surgery, but you still have psychiatric evaluation, like in the UK. So the surgery is optional, but you will still have to go through a doctor, a psychiatrist, to get diagnosed.
And oh, diagnosed with
Gender dysphoria. Um,
ah,
yeah.
I see. I see. Wow, that's a lot of things I wasn't aware of right now. Wow.
I mean, well, in our country, it doesn't.
Right.
Those things don't exist.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that doesn't.
But now that we touched on a bit on like these requirements and stuff, doesn't that eliminate the choice if you're being if a trans person is just being forced but to
Because yeah, some
to
trans
transition.
people don't feel the need to
Yes.
surgically, uh, change their, sexual organs. But wow, how would that feel if you really did want to legally transition and yet you don't want to undergo the procedures that they require?
I imagine that is difficult, you know. That's
Mhm.
how a lot of people feel in the Philippines because like even if you do get the surgery, you're not allowed to because there's a 2014 law that says you can only make changes to the birth certificate if you can prove that there was a clerical error in the inputting of your information. So that law has actually blocked any form of gender recognition that we can
Right.
get. And that's one of the things, one of the hurdles that we have to kind of jump over. Um, Nung unang panahon, madaling magpapalit ng pangalan at saka ng sex on your birth certificate. Ang kailangan mo
That's
lang
true.
ay pera and and a court order. Um, but I think in 2008 or 2007, there was a Supreme Court case that made it more difficult for people to change. Two cases. One was the Jeffrey Kagandahan case. Jeff is an intersex person assigned female at birth, but identifies as male, um, has an intersex condition that makes him appear male. Um,
Mm.
so the Supreme Court said, yeah, you can change your documents to male because you have an intersex condition. Um,
Hmm.
but then Meli Silverio um, applied for the same thing, basically to change her documents because she wanted to get married to a cisgender man. Um, she's had the surgery, she's had everything done. She's been living as a woman all her entire life. She just wanted her documents changed so that she can get married. And the
Yeah.
Supreme Court said, no, you don't have a physical condition, and so no,
Uh,
even if you have a vagina, it's not a real vagina. So
oh,
so there's these
wow.
inconsistencies in the rulings, in the law, in how the system is being run. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it is very subjective here.
yeah, it is. It's mostly a matter of money. I have one friend, the man, name change. She didn't go for her legal gender marker change because she knew that she wasn't going to be able to get it. But she changed her
Mhm.
name, and all that required was a court order and publications in a newspaper. Um, so fairly easy. But again,
Fairly.
money, and you need a lawyer.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, money makes the
Uh,
world go
that
around here, so.
no, that's quite sad, especially if there's a lot of trans people who just can't, who don't have the means to be able to do all that.
yes,
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
imagine the procedures themselves are really expensive already,
Hmm.
and to top it off with that, it's like, wow, you need to be really rich or you're gonna go broke.
But also it's an incursion on your bodily autonomy, as you said earlier, diba? Na parang,
Hmm.
what if you don't want the surgery? Like I don't want the
Right.
surgery. Why should I go through that just to change my
Hmm.
name so that it looks like me in my passport? Uh, diba? So ayan.
It's pretty heavy.
So is it yeah, yeah, it's quite like knowing it, and like it's good we see it and we recognize all these topics that usually get swept under the
Yeah.
rug
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we've said, and we bring it to light, or at least we make it more visible
Hmm.
through these conversations. And oh, it's really heavy.
And this is why these things are
Like,
important. So thank you for organizing these things and providing a platform for trans people to talk and speak and be heard. So yay, congratulations
Yeah.
to you.
Thank you. But it was
thank you.
mostly because we were looking around for like I don't know, trans resources detailing actual trans experiences. And
Mm-hmm.
although there are some, and mostly like from other countries, of course, we don't really have that kind of discourse here in the Philippines where we could just openly let trans people talk without being censored, or
Mm-hmm.
um, with them being able to detail their experiences without fear of being, persecuted for
Yeah.
it.
Oh, and speaking of that, may I make a plug?
Yes, please do.
Yes.
I,
Of course, of course.
I'm actually one of the editors of the Trans Filipinas Anthology Project. Um, it's a book
Oh,
project where we want to
Oh,
compile, stories, essays, poetry, artwork, visual art, whatever, written by trans people,
that's amazing.
queer people,
that's so
gender
amazing.
non-binary people, anyone. Give it to us, and we will
Oh my God,
put it
that's
in a book,
beautiful.
and we will publish it.
Whoa! Okay, for all
We'll
the
add that in
artists
our
out
show
there. Yeah,
notes.
we'll add that in our show notes. If
Yes,
ever you have a
please.
link, please do send it to us
Yeah,
later.
I'll send
Because
it. It's facebook.com/trans Filipinas Anthology. And all the information is there. We have an open call for papers. The deadline is March 31, so it's a bit tight. Um,
Oh,
but
oh, okay.
don't worry
right.
about the deadline. Let us, the editors, worry about the deadline. Worry about the submission, because we want
Right,
more
right.
voices there. We want more, as Yaska said. Um, trans people writing in their own voice without fear of repercussion.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Actual representation coming from
yeah.
trans people.
Trans,
That's
That
an
is
gender
amazing
beautiful.
diverse,
project.
non-binary, you are
Yeah.
welcome. So write
Wow.
something.
And to think that when that does get published, younger trans people will see that, oh, there is a place
Yes.
for me to release my art into the world. I love
Yes,
that idea so much.
exactly. The editors
It's so
are
beautiful.
the triumvirate of trans academics in the Philippines. uh, the three witches of Macbeth. It's me, and then there's Dr. Brenda Alegre, who teaches at Hong Kong University, and Dr. Jaya Jacobo, who teaches at Coventry University in the UK. So
Oh,
this is a local
Wow.
publication, but because our networks are international, we want to make the book available to international audiences as well, to show the world that queer people in the Philippines have something to say. Um,
yes. And a lot of queer people in the Philippines are talented.
exactly. Um,
I just want to ask, is it just for Filipinos, Filipino trans, or is it open like for international trans
as as
artists as
long
well?
as you have one drop of Filipino blood in you, because we also want to. We've asked some people who are migrants, um, first
Right,
generation,
right.
second generation migrants, to write about their own experiences as well, and that's fine as long as you are, Filipino. Um,
Filipino.
yeah.
Okay. So for people who are half like me, your submissions are still
Yes,
accepted. Just
of
kidding.
course.
Yeah, of course.
Living in the Philippines or living abroad, it doesn't matter, because that we
Mhm.
want to show that the trans experience is a broad, diverse experience. It's not just
Yes, yes.
people living in the Philippines; it's also migrants, and the Filipino diaspora is part of our DNA now, because we're everywhere. Um,
Yeah.
so we want to highlight also that migrant experience of transness. um yeah, so please write and
Right.
That's
submit.
really amazing.
Please do, please do.
Speaking about literature, I personally for me, I've been looking for. I'm trying to look for more queer literature for
Me
queer
too.
publications, and
Me
this is
too.
perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, I see this in comic books, or at least like first could before the pandemic, I'd go to a lot of comic conventions, and
Mhm, mhm.
uh, it's a good in comics, like comics with a
Hmm.
K, not a C, and it's good. And you see actual Filipino artists, and there would be some queer artists, and I love seeing
Hmm.
their works, even though it's not always there. But oh my god, this is
Yeah,
amazing.
so
Yeah. Wow.
that's why we came
I'm
up with
glad
this
we're gonna be
project.
able to get the word. Yeah.
Yeah, so we
We're gonna
want
more get the
more.
word out there for
Yes,
More,
you.
please, because we want more young people to write about their experience. Because your experiences are very different from mine. Um, so we want again a very very diverse kind of set of voices for this book project.
Amazing.
I'm so excited.
Me too. I'm so excited. I'll buy my own issue when it comes out. Yeah.
Don't just buy,
Yeah,
submit.
no, wait.
Oh well,
Yeah, submit.
I'm not much of a writer.
Oh, I don't care. We'll fix up the writing. Just write your experiences. Give us something to publish, and the editors will work with you, so that um, you're happy with whatever gets published.
Okay.
That's how dedicated we
That's
are.
nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, speaking of literature and stuff, now that we brought it, are there aside from the anthology, or at least before this project came into light, lol, um, are there proper representations for trans people in literature?
In Philippine literature, um, literature kasi is not my forte. So I'm
Oh,
gonna be
okay.
giving very limited examples. Um, in the 90s also, the Ladlad anthology was published. Um,
Mhm.
J.D. Garcia and Danton Remoto edited it. It's a series of 3 books, and some of those books contain some essays by trans and gender diverse people. Um, Jaja Saturna comics graphic novel
Oh yes.
um, can be read as a trans character kasi literally she swallows a stone and then becomes a woman. So like
Right.
if that's not hormones, I don't know what is. um,
Right.
ano pa ba? Um, madami kasing aspects of queerness in Philippine literature. Jane Garcia. Um, Nick Joaquin has some characters that can be read as queer. They're not articulated as queer because, of course, it was the time, but they can be read as queer. Um, yeah, yun lang alam ko. But again, this my knowledge of literature is very, very limited. I'm more of a film person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's okay. But it's good to know that at least there's some. But it might be another topic for
Mhm.
another day, though.
Yeah. We can scour the internet
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah,
Like,
my co-editor Jaya Jacobo is a professor of literature. So yeah, get
Wow.
in touch with her.
we'll try
One of these
maybe.
days,
Yeah,
maybe.
maybe for future projects.
Yep.
Wow.
Sorry,
I mean,
I
yes,
was
you
just
have.
amazed. Just
Yeah,
taking
I'm
in,
blown too.
yeah,
Like,
taking that in, because I think our generation's really excited for that because we don't really get a lot of avenues where we can release,
to
yeah, to
express.
express ourselves. I mean, aside of social media, of course, like serious publications like this, or where we're taken seriously for the things that we're trying to say. It's extremely rare.
Yep.
So thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for letting us know, because maybe if you tell us later, we can release it earlier than the episode so that people will know about it earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Nazo.
Yeah.
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 I'm still in shock.
It's okay. We can edit out the pauses. Don't worry.
Wow. Like we started with like misconceptions and stereotypes, and here we are to actually, well, there now's the time to
Break
uh
these.
well,
Yeah.
correct. Well, break
Yeah.
this. I mean, give like a new image that's not like the whole negative,
Mm-hmm.
or represent what is usually erased or made invisible by
Mm-hmm.
society,
Yeah, exactly.
especially in the Philippines.
That's what the anthology aims to do. It's like, yeah, there are misconceptions, there are stereotypes about us. Debunk them. Tell the world that you're not this or that you are. Who cares? Um, because
Yeah.
the other thing that I wanted to talk about, sorry, I'm leading the discussion, is
No, it's okay. It's fine.
there's a notion that stereotypes are bad. they're not.
Mm, mm.
They're not necessarily bad. They're bad because people think they're bad, but they're not inherently bad. Like the parlorista stereotype. What's wrong with being loud and being super bakla and super effeminate and owning that part of your personality? What's wrong with that? You know? Um,
Right.
the problem with the stereotype really is if there's only one type of representation that you see, tapos paulit-ulit siya,
Mm.
that's when the stereotype
Ah,
becomes bad. So it's not a question of the stereotype being bad on its own, but the stereotype existing in a diverse universe. You know,
mm.
if
That's putting it into perspective.
mhm,
Yeah.
if there are diverse representations in cinema, in literature, in media, then the stereotypes lose their stigma, 'di ba?
Mm-hmm.
So kailangan i-diversify ng pelikula at ng media yung mga klase ng representasyon na pinapakita nila about trans people. No, na hindi lahat ng trans people parlorista. Hindi lahat ng parlorista trans, 'di ba? Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we're also professionals, we're also lawyers, we're also doctors, um, we're professors, we're teachers, we're researchers, we're students. Some of us are even religious. Some of us are pastors.
Yes.
Some of us are counselors, therapists. You need to diversify the kind of representation because trans people are diverse. Um, hindi lahat tayo pwedeng maging parlorista. I can't cut hair. I tried cutting my husband's hair. Disaster.
At least it wasn't your hair, so you don't have to
Yeah,
live
that's
with
why that's why I tried it on
it.
them. um, so ayun, yun lang no, na parang oo, may mga trans na fashion designer, interior decorator, architect, artists, creative people, yes. But also, there are other trans people who are not those and who don't excel in those
Right.
fields. In other words, there is potential for trans excellence everywhere, diba? So,
Like all people.
yeah, like
Yeah.
everyone else. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And that's really amazing, especially when you said trans people are diverse, and we must recognize and celebrate that diversity, especially in a
Yes.
society that aims to
Hmm.
box us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Well,
that,
yeah, we've covered a
that really
lot of
warms my
things
heart.
today. Yeah, it does warm my heart as well,
I know.
Joy.
There is one more thing. Um,
Mhm.
kasi the whole debunking of the stereotype by diversifying it, that's good and everything. That can be a positive thing, but there's one caveat. Um, in many cases, especially in the Philippines, because culturally we're very conservative, um, it might tend to play into respectability politics. That the only kinds of respectable trans people are those that are professional, the doctors, the lawyers,
Mhm.
the professors. Um, kasi may mga nakakabit na moral judgments on these people, on these professions, di ba? Um, I think that's one of your questions, eh? Na,
Yes, yes.
yeah. Do people around you make you feel or have given you certain expectations to behave, dress, blah blah blah? Um, yeah, because that's where the respectability politics comes in. Because like I'm gonna talk about my own experiences because I can't speak for everyone else.
Yes,
But
yes.
like I grew
Please
up
do.
in a middle class, upper middle class household. So I had parents who were very conservative, very religious, goes to church every Sunday. Um, and one of the stereotypes they had in mind is if I was gonna be bakla, if I was gonna be trans, then I would be a parlorista. And like I don't mind talking about this, but when I was very young, my dad said to me, kasi sinumbong ako ng teacher ko, my homeroom advisor talked to my parents
Oh
and
my
was like,
god.
bakla po yung anak niyo.
Sorry. You just outright said that. Wow.
Yeah, I wasn't at that
I
conversation.
feel
I
so
wasn't at that
bad.
conversation kasi so I keep imagining it. So parang, I wonder how that conversation went. Like, bakla po yung anak niyo. And like, my parents are not headless. They know. 'Cause
Yeah.
I made no effort to hide it. I loved Miss Universe as a kid. I was collecting all the Miss Universe pictures, and like, so my dad comes up to me and tells me, "Oh, your teacher says that you're bakla. If you're gonna be bakla, then I'll just pull you out of private school, put you in public school, and then I'm just gonna have you learn how to cut hair and be a parlorista." And that
What? That's the
traumatized me.
only option?
Yeah, that
Oh my
traumatized
god.
me. So I was like, oh no, I'm not going to let this brilliant mind go to waste. um, so I became a bigger nerd than I was, and started doing better in school. And like, because that lit a fire under my ass. I had to kind of prove that I was bakla, but I'm also very, very good at what I do. And I'm
Mhm,
very
mhm.
smart. And that's where the respectability politics comes in. Na parang, if you are gender non-conforming, if you are non-binary or trans, my expectation to be respectable. And maraming levels
Mm.
yon. Hindi lang siya about the profession, about professional excellence, hindi lang yon. It's also about the way you dress. Dapat hindi ka
Mhm.
mukhang malandi. That's what my mother always told me. Parang, maiksi na naman yung
Yeah.
shorts mo. Mababa na naman yung neckline mo. Diba? So parang,
Mhm.
on the one hand, it's affirming because like I'm being policed in the way a cisgender girl would have been policed. But at the same time,
Although that isn't a good thing. Yeah.
exactly. At the same time, I was like, but I don't care if people think
But I don't.
if
Yeah.
people think I'm a slut, I don't care. I'm gonna wear a
Yeah.
very short skirt. If they want to look, they can look. They can't touch, but they can look.
But they can't.
Bahala na lang sila kung
Yeah.
anong makita nila. I can't guarantee that they will like what they will see, but they're free to look. And I'm like, that for me was very
Mhm.
empowering. But again, there's this respectability politics nga, na parang added
Yes.
burden siya on trans people, especially trans people who are professional. Na parang, yeah.
Yeah, we're expected to look good.
Mhm.
I just as a
Yeah.
genderqueer person, we're expected to look good. If you don't look good, they're gonna be like, ano ba yan?
Yeah,
Right? Like, let that
Yeah.
reaction of,
Yeah.
ano ba yan? Ganyan ka na nga, tapos ganyan pa itsura mo. Like,
exactly.
yeah, that thought. That's what it is. That's
Yeah.
respectability.
Because it's
Mm-hmm.
not just parents, it's also other trans people. Sometimes it's other
Well,
trans people as well. Because like when I was in Hong Kong, um, one of the local trans women, her advocacy was for to train trans women to, for want of a better word, to pass so that they are not detected as trans people. So she was giving lessons on how to put your makeup on how to dress, on how to walk, so that you don't look
voice
like a
training as
trans
well.
woman.
Mm.
And I'm like, what?
There's nothing wrong with being trans. Why would you
Exactly.
wanna like enforce passing on to other people? I don't really
Yeah.
like the word either.
Yeah.
I think it's really more of the pressure of
Mhm.
getting
Hmm.
accepted, and I think as you know, being bilang mga being gay in
Hmm.
general, like general gay, like there's always that notion that we crave for
Hmm.
acceptance,
I mean,
and it
it's not
can't be helped that some some trans people would opt for that.
Hmm.
yeah, yeah,
Not just for trans people, but for other LGBT,
Yeah.
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I
and that's
I totally get it.
I-
My friends and I were talking about this, and like, um, I occupy a certain kind of privilege. I am 4'11". I'm very petite.
Mhm.
pocket-sized Filipino stereotype.
Chocolate.
I can be very easily assumed as cis. So I navigate
Mm.
spaces very differently from my other friends who are not quite as, um, I hate the term passing, diba?
Mhm.
Um, and
Yes.
that's one of my privileges. That's why I'm always like, no, I am not cis. I am trans. Trans women look like this too. So I'm so I'm very very clear about that. So that, uh, but sometimes I forget it. Sometimes I forget that I can be assumed as cis. Yeah, in many other contexts, passing is a matter of life and death. Um,
That's true.
because
Yes.
there is
That's
so
very
much
true.
violence directed at trans people, trans women especially.
Especially, yes,
So
yes.
in many cases, in many contexts around the world, to pass is literally a matter of life and death.
Yes.
Because if
It's
you
a
are
means of
openly
survival.
trans, you get targeted by violence, by discrimination. You might lose your job, you know.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
there's sorry,
Yeah.
there are
It is.
these things are never really, one-sided. There's multiple
Mhm.
dimensions that you need
Yes.
to look at. There's multiple layers of um, analyses that you need to do and you need to look at in order to fully flesh out what it means to be trans.
Yes.
That if you look
Yeah,
at
nothing
this,
is black and white.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you look at the stereotypes that we've been talking about, if you peel the layers away, um, there
Yes.
are so many different kinds of things that you discover. Um,
Yeah, and we've learned some of that because of this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah. Very eye opening,
Yeah, very
actually.
indeed.
And we see, yeah, finally seeing things that we never thought about
di ba?
before. And I want to ask, like, you touched on about uh the gender violence, or at least the targeting of trans
Mhm.
women. I mean, for you as a woman, do you uh I mean, I'm this is my question stems from like me. I mean, since I'm assigned female at birth, and even though I don't identify as non-binary, and I always wanted to ask a trans woman, do you feel uh how do you feel about the toxic masculinity and the whole issues that patriarchy bring? Like, do you feel the male
Oh
gaze?
yeah.
Ah, yes.
Like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and
Easy answer, yes.
and and how do you live with that? Like,
Oh,
with all
that's such a
those.
complicated question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was like, I always thought this because people always, because you know what? Okay, there because other people would say trans women are not women, but then they're women, and it's an experience that women, regardless whether trans women or cisgendered women, experience. Now that you have just said yes, you experience it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're under the
So
thumbs of men
Um,
all the time.
yeah, fuck the patriarchy. Um, that's always kind of been my motto ever since I
Mm-hmm.
ever since I kind of started going into gender studies. I was like, okay, the 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 kalaban is not a specific person. It's not a specific
Mm-hmm.
one man, Donald Trump, char. But it's an entire system that produces
Yeah.
men like Donald Trump. You know, um,
Mm-hmm.
I want to answer this muna, and then I'll go on. I'll go to talk about the gays that you mentioned. But
Mm-hmm.
okay.
living under the patriarchy, it's kind of like it's not just women as well. It's not just trans women or cis women or lesbian women. Some trans men are also subjected to patriarchal violence. Because the patriarchy does not see them as real men, so it's like they have to be punished. Um, that's why there's a lot of sexual violence committed against trans men. Um,
That's true.
in the same way that trans women suffer both sexual and uh, gender-based physical violence. Um, it's also terrible. um, Yeah. So the world is a dangerous place for trans people, partly because we're not seen as real, whether it's real
Mm.
women or real people. Um, we're thought of as, um, objects, and that brings me to the
Mm.
male gaze. This whole issue about people, men specifically, looking at you, and for want of a better word, drooling. um, where do I begin? Uh,
I'm sorry if it sort of came
oh,
heavy. Please feel free to
no, no, no,
answer
no,
as
no.
comfortably.
I will try
Yeah.
to be as candid as I can, because who would I be if I were not frank and candid? I have gotten into trouble because of this several times. Uh, so I'm used to it. But the question of the male gaze, my answer is this: own it, use it against
Own it.
them. Again, I told you
That's a
that in
lesson for all women out there.
yeah, I told you that in Markova I would be the one seducing Japanese men and slitting their throats. That's how I live. Because like I understand that, for some women, trans or cis, modesty is very important. That's where they find empowerment.
Their strength,
Um,
yes, yeah.
but for me, sexuality is where I find my empowerment. So
Mm.
I am one of those people who would walk the slut walk and in my lingerie and go, yeah, go ahead. Look at me. Look at me. Oh, you're drooling. Look at me. Keep looking at me. Oh, you're still drooling. My God. That's just me. Um,
Yes, yes.
so sexuality is very empowering for me. And again, I can only speak for
Mhm,
myself. I can
Yes.
only speak about, my own experiences navigating the male gaze, because the male gaze has gotten me into trouble a few times. you know Again, I am very easily assumed as cis, so I hooked up with one guy. This is an example. I hooked up with one guy, and he didn't believe that I was trans. So like in the middle of making out, um when he discovers that I'm trans, he just kind of freezes and the blood drains from his face. And I'm like, okay, this is the moment where many trans people are killed or beaten.
Right,
This is the
right,
same
right.
moment that Jennifer Laude had to go through before she
Yes,
died.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
I got lucky because the boy that I was with, the man that I was with, was not a violent man, you know.
Exactly.
But I I have been in those positions where the male gaze looks at you as simply an object to be consumed rather than a
Mm.
person. So one of the techniques that I kind of do to flip that around is um maraming layers yan, di ba? Kasi, sorry,
Mm.
lighten up. It's
Yes.
okay. I survived.
No, okay, okay.
Yeah.
It just
We
scares
got
me a
scared
lot.
for you. I was like, I know it's a
It's
story,
okay.
but
It
like,
ends very
oh my
happily.
god.
So the blood
Okay,
drains from
okay.
his eye, from his face, and I'm like, okay, I told you that I was trans. Did you not believe me? And he said, no, I didn't believe you because you look like a woman. Like I am a woman. So I sat him down and I went like, Trans 101, ito. So
Starts lecturing.
yeah, exactly. So like I got lucky, but also I am a brown trans woman. Um, Brown trans women are sexualized in pornography, and it teaches cis
Mm-hmm.
men to look at us as objects of desire. So to flip that, I fuck as many men as I want.
Oh my god.
How to educate, how to fight against patriarchy.
Sorry, is this too much information? Because this is
No, no,
this
it's
is
conquering
no,
them in another way.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like, white men want to sleep with trans women. A lot of white men see trans women as
Mm-hmm.
objects of desire. And I'm like, nah, I'm going to colonize the colonizer.
Right, right, right.
um, but that was, again, this is only about me. I cannot speak for other trans women. I cannot
Yes.
speak for other women. For some women, they don't see sexuality as that empowering. I do,
Yeah,
at
and
least
that's
when I was
valid.
sexually active. Yeah. So, so it's difficult. My advice is, if you are queer or trans and you're navigating the the male gaze, um, find your own way, find your own technique, um, and ask people, you know, because this is one of the things that we don't really talk about when we talk about sexuality and transness and you know the male gaze and patriarchy. We always talk about sexual violence. We always talk about um, domestic violence as well, but we never talk about pleasure. Let's talk about
Right.
pleasure because
Because there are good things.
yes, sex
Yes.
can be a very important source of pleasure. And I'm very candid
Mhm.
about this. You know, in my classes, undergrad or post grad, they know I'm the resident slut. Um, and like, yeah, so like, we need to talk about pleasure more. We need to talk about sex as, a form of empowerment rather than something that we have to avoid or we have to be careful
Yeah,
about.
a taboo. Mhm.
Yeah. Because there's a significant lack of these discourses, you know. Um, and me and my friends were like, we've known each other since high school. We were very, very good friends. But we don't talk about our sex lives. Why is that? So like,
Right.
It's a
It's a
taboo.
taboo,
yeah.
especially growing up here in the Philippines. It's not
Hmm.
something, unless your parents were open about it, it's not something you're
Yeah.
allowed to discuss, much less think about.
Yeah. I did find this very, very interesting workshop um,
Mhm.
uh, created by, oh no, I forgot her name. Jamie, Dr. Jamie something. Never mind. But it was my friend who works at Grinder. Um,
Mm.
they
Oh.
were at the conference that I was running, and they were doing a sex workshop, um, and it was called Mapping Desire. A map, yeah, a mapping of the desires. Um, and I wasn't able to go because I was busy with some other stuff for the conference. But she gave me all the materials that she was using for the workshop. And I read through them. It's just a list of questions that you talk about to a group of people who may or may not be close to you, but are able to provide a safe space for you to talk about desire. And I did it in my class, and everyone loved it because like the questions are very candidly, um, when I was a kid, what did I fantasize about? Um, what's my greatest source of sexual pleasure? Which part of my body
Mhm.
do I like playing with during sex?
The most.
So honest, candid questions like that, and then it allows you to kind of see um, where points of pleasure are in your own sexuality. And again, that for me is very, very empowering. And I would encourage people to go through workshops like that when they can.
Yeah. Also, it
That might
helps.
be a possible project in the
I
future.
will hook you up.
Zoe. Oh, Zoe.
Yes.
Oh my god, I
No,
think
I
that would
mean,
be a good idea. Yeah. Like,
well, no, personally, also for me personally, it's one of a personal advocacy that we discuss that, because in our very conservative society, there's not much talks on that, and I do believe that uh, sex education should also be part of curriculums and all that. So it's good we have talks about breaking the taboo and having these conversations and teaching people to get in touch with their inner
Inner
sexualities.
goddess. Just kidding.
Inner
Inner
God.
goddess. No, but yeah, I think we should push for more inclusive sex education, not just between men and women, of course. 'Cause
Yeah,
a lot
we
of
need one for queer.
yeah, we
I
need one for queer people because we
Can
don't
you
know
imagine we
what
had
we're
a sex?
doing. Just kidding.
No, for example, we had safe sex talks before. Like it was an
Mm-hmm.
akle in
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
UPM, but it was more what I personally for me it was like. I mean, I learned a lot about like different, contraceptions and stuff like, and like that was good, but it felt predominantly cisgendered.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. What applies to
Yeah.
us, you know?
Yeah.
What part of that can we apply in our lives?
Uh-huh.
Because, there's not a lot of talk about it. I mean, sex itself in the Philippines is already taboo. What about, gay sex or lesbian sex? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's even less talked about.
Yeah.
So,
I
yeah.
agree. Because again, centuries of colonization have taught us that sex is bad, that you shouldn't talk about sex in public. Diba? And it's still
Right,
there. The
yeah.
Catholic Church still will not let us talk about sex. And sometimes it's not even Catholicism or religiosity that stops people from talking about sex. It's that certain middle class, ethos of, oh, we don't talk about those things, you know?
Oh, no, no,
Um,
not here, child.
yeah, exactly. So, like,
Mhm.
we've been taught not to talk about sex. And when we do talk about sex, it's
Yeah.
always cisgender, penile,
Mhm,
vaginal, um,
mhm.
and it's always sex ed. Parang,
Right,
if you
yeah.
have sex with everyone, you will get gonorrhea or blah blah blah. And like, yeah, it's important to talk about these things. It's important to arm people, young people especially, with the knowledge to exercise their sexuality safely, um, to protect themselves from sexually transmitted infections. That's important. How to put a condom on. My God, how many men have I slept with who don't know how to put a condom on? Um, they can't even tell if it's upside down or inside out. Like, yeah, those things are important to talk about. Yeah, but those aren't the only things that we need to be talking about. We need to be talking about
Yes,
pleasure. We
yes.
Yes.
need to be talking about intimate connections with other people.
Yeah.
Right, because a lot of people
Intimacy.
don't know what they're comfortable with,
Yeah,
because they never
Or they
get
don't
to
know the
think about it or
boundaries.
talk about it.
yeah.
That's why they find themselves in dangerous situations or
Mhm.
situations where they're very uncomfortable. So, like, honestly, if you're willing, maybe sometime we could do we could do that kind of thing
Yeah,
as
I
long
would
as we
love
get
to.
approval.
It was very illuminating for me as well. Um, but yeah, I did it in class with students who knew each other and who were friends with each other and who trusted each other. I think that's a very important part of the workshop, that
Mhm,
you're
mhm.
able to provide that safe space. Um, and
Yes,
and
yes,
I
of
and I
course.
told them, whatever is discussed in this class, you are not supposed to talk about that outside, even with your friends, even with the same people you talk about. So whatever comes out here in this workshop remains in this
Stays here.
workshop.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
Yeah.
but also think
Yeah,
about,
that's the
like,
kind of space.
a lot of people don't know what's pleasurable for them.
Yeah, because they don't explore, if that's
Yeah,
the right word. Yeah, they don't
'cause
explore themselves because it's seen as,
a sin,
a sin. Yeah, same. I was gonna say it's a sin
because
here.
masturbation is a sin. Uh, so,
Yeah.
like, you need, in order to know what feels good for you and what may feel good for your partner, you need to know your body. Um,
Right.
that's also an essential part of queerness and transness. I think that we don't talk about. Um,
Mm,
Yes.
uh,
true. True.
we talk about body dysphoria, gender dysmorphia, um, but we don't talk about owning the body, and what is pleasurable in the body, and how the body can have, a significant potential for creating pleasure. Um, because the trans discourse is centered around dysphoria. Uh,
Right. Right.
and sometimes it is dysphoric. Sometimes we do experience dysphoria, but many other cases, there is significant potential for euphoria, for happiness and
Euphoria.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Because you don't only have to love your body like mentally or psychologically, but you can start loving your body physically as well,
Yeah.
starting with yourself.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's such a good concept. Hmm.
That took a
So
moment.
Are you okay?
her brain is exploding.
No, it's yeah. I'm like series of internal chain reactions in my head. Like
Yeah.
yeah, when you touch on like on dysphoria, it kind of made me wonder like I mean it might not be quite related to supposedly the topic, but maybe for future conversations like it's quite important to actually have these sex talks and also
Mhm.
dysphoria. Like, can you imagine how it would how for let's say a trans person how it limits what they can do for
Mhm.
themselves and for their partner,
Yeah.
Yeah, because
and it's
yeah, trans and non-binary people aren't the only ones who experience dysphoria anyway.
Hmm.
Like
yeah,
cis people too. They
Yeah.
don't feel comfortable with their bodies either.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
So,
yeah, it would benefit
yeah,
them
because
as
there's
well.
it should be
fundamental
incorporated.
discourse again of that trains us to think about the body in certain ways that are not necessarily empowering. We talk about
Right.
exercise, we talk about health, we talk about, you know, how to take care of your body, but we don't talk about the potential for the body to give you pleasure. We talk about the body as
Mm-hmm.
if it's something that is divorced from who we are, you know, that the body
Right,
is something
right,
you need
right.
to take care of. No, the body is you. You are your
Like it's separate
body.
from you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's such a great point. Yeah.
I'm still having
Yeah, yeah. I
chain
can tell.
reaction to
I'm
that.
looking at Zoe right now, and I know that she's processing. Right.
So yeah, I'm I'm
Okay.
I'm okay with those questions as well. If you want to talk about that.
Right. But I think we don't have much time left on the episode.
Mhm.
Honestly, we've covered so many things that I couldn't even begin to think about covering. And I'm so glad that we were able to do that because having someone of your expertise and knowledge teach us about these things that we don't really think about usually.
And openness.
Thank
And
you.
openness.
Yeah, the openness.
Now imagine if I was still teaching in UP.
Right. I wish
We'll
you
definitely
were.
enroll in your class. I wish I was
Definitely.
in that class when you were
Like
class.
I'd enlist immediately.
I mean, I would sit in if I couldn't enlist.
Yeah, like stand by the door, Zoe, when we have free time, just like
I would
listen
sit in.
with a
I
cup.
would ask permission. Like,
Yeah,
hi, ma'am, can I join your class
'cause-
for
yeah,
the
I'm
day?
I was usually very open with sit-ins. My only rule is if you're in my class, you participate. So you talk. Even if you know nothing
uh,
about the topic, you talk.
just like say your name. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Uh, uh, do you have a message for our listeners out there who are still navigating this world, who may be feeling lost or anything at all? Would you like to say something to them?
Oh yes. First of all, hello. um, but one, you're not alone. I think that's one of the
Mm,
things that people need to hear more because especially during the pandemic. And we know that in the Philippines, sometimes the family is not, the safest place to be queer. Um,
right.
there's this growing sense of isolation, and I want everyone to know that one, they're not alone, and two,
Mm,
it's okay to ask for help if you are
yeah.
struggling, if you are feeling really down, if you need someone to talk to, it is okay to ask for help. No one is judging you. No one is thinking that you're weak. No one is thinking that you have failed. I know those voices in my head very well. um, and I've worked with, friends and therapists to get to this point where, if I need help, I will ask for it,
Yes.
and I
Mhm,
want other people to know that that's perfectly fine. If you need help, ask for it. Um,
mhm.
if you need to contact us at Strap, we're on Facebook. Just look for I think we're at facebook.com/Strap Manila. Um, and then when you are, or when you do feel empowered, when you do feel like you can do this, write it down and then send it to us.
Yes,
And then we will put it in a
we're there
book.
as well. Yes, yes.
Again, it's facebook.com/Trans Filipinas Anthology, just one word. Um, and we want to get this book out, hopefully by the end of this year, if we can,
Mhm.
get everything and edit everything together. We're looking for submissions from queer, gender non-binary, gender diverse, trans people who are from the Philippines or living in the Philippines. Artwork, visual arts, poetry, essays. If you want to publish an epic poem, um, we will publish an excerpt. But yeah, we're very interested in hearing the voices of the diverse trans community in the Philippines. And yeah, yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for having me, and
Yes.
congratulations on Bahagsari. I'm so happy that that organization is there. I hope you keep it up. I hope it goes on forever. Um,
We hope so too.
when I was a student at UP Manila, I wanted an organization that was like that was open to LGBTQI people. And I'm so happy that there's finally one. And congratulations on your work, and thank you for inviting me into this wonderful space. Yeah.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much for being
thank you so
here. We learned so many things.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Trans Speaks. We hope you learned a lot about misconceptions, stereotypes, and how they affect the trans community and individuals. That's it for today. We'll see you later.